thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
Head of growth at Anthropic, no big deal. I've had a lot of people come on this podcast from companies that claim to be the fastest growing companies of all time. And Anthropic actually is, if you look at the trajectory. I just have some of the numbers here just so people understand how absurd this is. So you guys were at $1 billion ARR at the start of 2025, then hit something like $4 billion mid-2025, then $9 billion ARR at the end of 2025. And the last number I've seen is you guys are at $19 billion ARR, which just to put a couple pieces of context here. One is that's from $1 to $19 billion in 14 months. I have so many questions. First of all, the story of how you actually landed this role is really interesting. Talk about how you got this role.
Yeah, it's a little unorthodox. So it was funny when I did my onboarding, they walked through what percentage of the cohort came through referrals, what percentage came through applying on the website, what percentage came through sourcing, and I was on none of those. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And basically, the way that I got to Anthropic was that I was actually a user of Claude, and I was using it a lot. I was like, man, these guys, like, great product, great company, but they really, like, obviously don't have a growth team. And what I did was I just sent Mike Krieger a cold email. He was the chief product officer. I sent him a cold email saying like, hey, love what you guys do, love the product. I think you guys badly need a growth team, want to chat. And I didn't expect he would respond. And, he responds and says, hey, yeah, I'm interested. Let's talk. And it's funny. I didn't know. I mean, I wouldn't have known. They were not hiring for a growth team. There were no growth PM roles listed, but they were just at that time starting to think about hiring a growth team. So it was very good timing. But yeah, one spoke to Mike, and one thing led to another. He said, I'm the only PM that he's hired from cold email. And I feel very lucky that he decided to respond to my email.
I did not know the story. That is another absurd fact. Clearly, you're good at cold email. What did you do in this cold email to get his attention?
I would say like I've basically perfected cold email over the years. So when I was a founder, I had to get really, really good at this. So I sent a lot of cold emails out and just honed the subject line, the message, and the tone. And so basically, I have in the subject line, the first thing is like from a conversion standpoint, someone sees the email, they need to click on it. And so I have a copy that I've tested that is like very, very high open rate. And so,
wait, what is this copy? Or is this a secret?
It's a secret. I think
we'll keep it. We'll kind of keep some
it's a secret. Okay. So that's one, getting them to open. I think the second is then the tactics of, you need to understand like where are people getting outreach, and if everyone's getting outreach in one area and then you reach out to them there, then you're not going to get as high of a response rate. So you can think about like LinkedIn, you can think about like work email. These are things that everyone is emailing. So there's ways to get people's personal emails out there. And so like, that's one thing that I did. And so, okay, I've got his personal email. I know the copy that works. And then it's just keeping it very short on here's who I am. Here's why I'd be a good fit. And we should chat. And these things typically don't work. And then you should always follow up a few times. I think my rule of thumb is like, if I really care about it, I should just keep reaching out to them until they tell me like, please stop. And so I would have kept doing that, but he responded the first time.
It makes sense that a talented growth person would be very good at cold email and getting people's attention. So that's almost like an interview step, is just, did I want to read this email? This episode is brought to you by our season's presenting sponsor, WorkOS. What do OpenAI, Anthropic, Cursor, Vercel, Replit, Sierra, Clay, and hundreds of other winning companies all have in common? They are all powered by WorkOS. If you're building a product for the enterprise, you've felt the pain of integrating single sign-on, SCIM, RBAC, audit logs, and other features required by large companies. WorkOS turns those deal blockers into drop-in APIs with a modern developer platform built specifically for B2B SaaS. Literally every startup that I'm an investor in that starts to expand upmarket ends up working with WorkOS. And that's because they are the best. Whether you are a seed stage startup trying to land your first enterprise customer or a unicorn expanding globally, WorkOS is the fastest path to becoming enterprise ready and unblocking growth. It's essentially Stripe for enterprise features. Visit workos.com to get started, or just hit up their Slack where they have actual engineers waiting to answer your questions. WorkOS allows you to build faster with delightful APIs, comprehensive docs, and a smooth developer experience. Go to workos.com to make your app enterprise ready today. Okay, so give us just like a glimpse of what it's like to be leading growth inside of Anthropic right now, the most by far fastest growing company in history. Just what is it like?
Yeah, I'd say it's very much a company-wide effort, right? So like, yes, we are the growth team. We have done great. I think we've driven a lot of impact, but honestly, man, we can't claim too much credit for the success of the company. Like, we as Anthropic are really a model company and an intelligence company first and foremost. And so the lion's share of like what has driven our success is our research team. We have, I think, the best research team in the world. We have great teams on inference and compute. And then there's many other teams like Claude Code, go-to-market, et cetera, who I think deserve much more credit than us. I think just zooming out, going to some of what you said earlier, that the growth trajectory has just been insane. That 10x year-on-year revenue growth trend has been there since the beginning. I think 2023 was 0 to 100 mil. 2024 was 100 to 1. Last year was 1 to roughly 10. And like I look back to when I joined in 2024, revenue was in the hundreds of millions, and just that trajectory to the end of 2024 and 2025, like week 2 of when I joined, we're going into 2025 revenue planning, and we have these like base case and aggressive case scenarios, and Daria's pushing the aggressive case scenario, and people are freaking out, being like, how the hell are we going to hit that? And Daria's like, I think we can actually go much higher than that. And I'm coming in like, this place is crazy. Like there's absolutely no way. And that happened, right? And then you get to the end of 2025, and it's like, okay, law of large numbers, there's going to be a pretty big slowdown here based on, your baseline rate of 10 billion. How are you going to keep growing at this rate? And like, it just like has not slowed down. And those numbers are public. The 19 billion number you quoted is from the end of Feb. So that is also out of date. And it's absolutely insane. Like the funniest thing is, something that I've noticed internally is like linear charts are just like not cool. Like no one cares about linear charts. Everything is log linear. So show me a log linear scale. And that's sort of a scale we think. And I think overall we're just, really hanging on by the seat of our pants. So we're trying to manage the growth and do the best that we can for our users.
I was talking to somebody at Anthropic about you, and they said that basically anytime they want something to grow, they ask you to help, and it works. So you talked about just like things are magical and amazing, and like Claude and all the tools y'all built are amazing innately, and that's a big part of the reason they grow. I think many people listening to this will be like, what do you even do a mole with like a magical micro god that just can do anything for you? Why do we need a growth person? What do you even do? Talk about just the stuff that you focus on, and maybe like a couple of the wins that your team has shipped that has helped accelerate growth.
I would say like they're not fully wrong, right? Like we're very, very lucky to have the best models in the world. We're very lucky to have products like Claude Code and Cowork. It certainly makes life a lot easier. Having said that, I would say this is like the hardest job I've had in my life. And that's, having been a founder, having been an investment banker and other things like that. It's tough. And if I look at what do we do as a growth team here, I think it's ultimately the same categories of things that you would think about at a normal company. So we care about acquisition, how are we getting more people in the door, the intent of the people coming through the door. We care about activation, the sign up flow, funneling people to the right products, making them successful. We care about things like monetization, free to paid conversion, pricing and packaging, all of that stuff. The categories of work is the same. I think then the probably the big differences is, I would say that like roughly 70% of what I spend my time on is what we internally refer to as success disasters. And that is where like things have gone so well that other things are breaking now. And I think anyone who's worked at companies that have gone through rapid growth, you think like Facebook or Uber or DoorDash early on, like they understand this viscerally, where scaling this much just brings a lot of challenges. So if you think about each of those categories on acquisition, on activation, on monetization, there's just a ton of firefighting, jumping from like one urgent thing to another. And it's often like extremely painful. And like, it's funny because you look at all the charts are like green, like fully up and to the right. And everyone's just like, it can be quite tough emotionally still. And so you need to sort of step back and just realize like, we're very lucky to have these problems. But that's sort of 70% of my time, I'd say, is just these like firefighting of success disasters. And I think the 30% remaining is just much more standard bread and butter growth work where it's like more proactive. So you think about, okay, if we have limited resources, which of the products, we have many different products, which of the products do we want to put some juice behind? What does our long-term pricing and packaging look like? Especially given that the technology is changing a lot and behavior and engagement trends are shifting. And then, things like we have a lot of new products coming up, like, okay, you ship co-work. Now what? Like, when is the right time that we should lean in as a growth team to start optimizing the core adoption funnel for co-work? So it's probably 70% just crazy firefighting, 30% more bread and butter stuff.
Okay, I'm going to dig into a lot of that stuff. One of the cleverest growth moves you all made recently was this idea of importing memory from ChatGPT, where you just made it really easy and kind of jumped on this trend of people getting really excited about Anthropic. Is there anything you could share about the behind the scenes story of that feature?
I was thinking about what can we do to improve the cold start problem and improve the new user experience. I think that activation is a really big challenge in AI. And so, that's like one example of something that we shipped that was very specific to a moment in time. But ultimately, that you zoom out, it's like, okay, how do you really make it easier for people who are signing up to have Claude understand who they are and understand how Claude can help them and get them to the right place?
I want to follow that thread, activation. There's something that comes up a ton when I talk to people driving growth on AI products. It's just like there's so much stuff trying to get your attention these days for people to get to a place where okay, wow, this is really going to be something I want to keep using. It proves to be really hard. And it's also just unreliable. Sometimes it's not going to be magical. It's AI. It's non-deterministic. I guess one is just like, how important is focusing on activation, getting people to that aha moment with AI products? And two, what are some things you've learned about how to do that well with Claude or AI in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that activation, it's critical, right? And defining that as like early activation, call it day 0, day 1 product experience. I think that historically, anyone who's been in growth or been in product understands that that's usually one of the highest levers that you have to actually even increase like longer term retention. And I think that the importance of that has just gotten exponentially higher. Now, zooming out, I feel like one of the biggest problems in the industry is capability overhang, where the models are just getting better so quickly. And the real challenge is on the product side of how do we start to diffuse those benefits to people, where even internally, like there's new models coming internally and you're sitting there, you're so busy. And when a new model's available, you need to like really carve out time to be like, what can this do? How do I need to update my priors? And if you think about more broadly for most people, you may have a model that is like, you may have AGI or some, model that can do all sorts of crazy things. But if people's instinct is to come there and be like, hey, what's the weather in SF? Then, they're not going to get the most out of the product. And so I think that it's tough because the model capabilities are rising so much. So like if I think about, okay, back when we had, I don't know, say like Opus 4, there's a series of things the model can do at that point, and Opus 4.5 unlocked a whole bunch of new things. You think about, okay, we sit there, we've got this new model, Opus 4, the time to then go and run a bunch of tests, figure out, okay, there's the capabilities from this new model. What are the right on-ramps to guide people to those features? You run tests, you get the learnings, you then ship a new flow. By then you may already have the next model, which unlocks newer capabilities that makes all these learnings irrelevant, right? So like, it's actually just like a really difficult problem to stay on top of. I think that many of the same things, same old trends in growth and activation remain, I think, accurate. Where to me, it's like ultimately some of the highest leverage is from finding the right product or the right feature for the right user. And I think that one learning, seen this time and time again across companies, actually like the right friction helps, and adding more friction usually works if you do it the right way. I think that's something I've consistently seen that we've seen here as well. So to me, I think it's really being able to identify what are the characteristics of a user that allows you to then recommend them to the right feature or product, and not being shy about adding friction to do that, I think is probably like the single biggest thing that's important here.
When I asked Ben Mann, one of the co-founders, former podcast guest, what to ask you about, and this is what he highlighted, is your experience, especially at Mercury, redoing onboarding and making it magical. And basically, he's in the same place as you of just how important it is for people to understand what the AI tool is capable of to help people decide to use it and stick with it. Is there an example of something you changed in onboarding that helped significantly improve activation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I like that he brings up Mercury. I talk about their product a lot. So worked on the growth team at Mercury. I think it's a fantastic product. It's something many people use. And the reason they use it is because it's a better banking experience than
I'm a very happy customer, just to put that out there. I love
great product. Highly recommend it. They have personal banking. Everyone should go and use it.
Right. They just launched that.
So I think that the interesting thing about Mercury is like, the core value is that it's a better experience, right? That's the reason you use it. You're not getting like better other things. It's a better product experience. And so that ethos is very, very deeply held within the company. It comes from a number of the founders. And I think that we had a big push one quarter when I was there on the onboarding flow. So onboarding flows for banking institutions and regulated entities are extremely complex. Like the amount of time I've spent on the difference between like a registered agent address and a legal address and a physical address, like these things are very, very complex. And we basically looked at the onboarding flow and we were like, okay, we've invested so much in quality in the rest of the product, but we haven't really done it here. And this is the first experience that people have. And so we said, forget metrics, forget growth, forget everything else. As the growth team on conversion, we're going to spend a whole quarter fixing quality in this flow. And so that's all we do. Like, forget the metrics. We're just going to make this as good of an experience as we can and fix all these, like, you go back from one field to the other field and adding in your beneficial ownership details. And it actually ended out being like, and probably until I joined here, like the single most impactful quarter that I've ever had as a growth PM in terms of the impact that it had. And so we saw a significant uplift from on basically our like onboarding started to completion from just focusing on quality. And so that to me is like a broader learning around quality drives growth that I think I've tried to bring to Anthropic. I think for us at Anthropic, some of the things that we've done in the onboarding flow is basically like we ask users questions around who they are, what their interest areas are, and we then use that to recommend different products and features. And like a number of people look at the flow and they're like, you have so much friction, it's such a long flow. And I'm like, yeah, we have the data, we're kind of happy with how that's performing.
What is your kind of a philosophy on friction, good friction versus bad friction?
I've just seen time and time again at every job I've been in growth that adding friction and adding the right steps leads to higher conversion and higher funnel completion. So you want to get rid of, and I think especially if you have high volume, you should test the majority of this and just learn and see like, does this apply to your business as well? But you want to get rid of annoying friction that doesn't add value. But the like, I think the most simple understanding people have is like, just solve time to value, cut all the steps and just get them into the product. And like, that doesn't work most times. Like, I think if you've really thoroughly tested your flows, I look at the companies I've been at, Masterclass. If you go through Masterclass's purchase flow right now, you'll go through all these steps in this quiz when you land on, when you're trying to buy, and you're like, I came here to buy, and it's taking me through all these questions. What are you here for, etc. I think it's easy to look at that and be like, why do they have this? This is like a terrible thing. Just cut it all. And it's like, no, like that's been thoroughly tested, and actually that was like a significant revenue driver because it helps users feel that the product is for them by understanding what their interests are and then recommending the content and classes there. One of the growth PMs on our team left to join Calm.com, the meditation app. If you go to Calm's, their landing page and you go through their purchase flow, their login flow, you'll see a quiz. It's like not a coincidence. At Mercury, we also tested, I think Imad posted on Twitter, like we broke out some steps in onboarding, and just having one screen, if you have like 5 or 6 different form inputs and you often break that into 2 screens and reduce the cognitive load to people, like that is something that performs well. We added steps into the flow there that actually performed well. Same at Anthropic. So I think that the takeaway to me is like, cut friction when it doesn't add to the experience of helping a user understand why the product is for them. But if you can help users understand a product, why a product is for them, and like how to use it, and what's most relevant to them, and it's going to add friction, don't shy away from it. Test it, confirm that it works for you. But I think this is like something that like most growth practitioners deeply understand.
And the for them is really important there. What you described is adding friction to better understand who they are so that you know how to recommend the right thing for them.
Correct. Yes. And like that like done right, it just flows through, right? So it helps you with activation, but then it helps you with life cycle. You know more about those users and why they're here. And like, most sophisticated businesses, you can then, even if someone drops off, you can do like lookalike targeting, and you can get them at the ad layer as well. So that initial piece of how you understand who the user is just like, it's a juice that just keeps on giving if you then use it right further down funnel.
Everyone's about to go do a bunch of teardowns of Claude's onboarding, masterclass onboarding, Mercury onboarding. Kind of as a tangent, I was at this PM dinner recently, and I was asking all the PMs, how has your role as a PM changed most with AI? Like, where has AI most impacted what you do? And one of the PMs answered that is actually doing competitive analysis, doing a bunch of like teardowns of what other people are doing for pricing pages and onboarding. So it's easy to do now. Just, hey, cowork. I don't know. Would you cowork for this or Claude? What would you use for that? Okay, this is good. Help people pick which tool to use. If you want to go do a bunch of teardowns of other competitors' onboarding flows, what would you use?
You can use Cowork for this, right? So you have Cowork with the Chrome extension. So if you task Cowork with the Chrome extension, go and look for these flows and give me a view of what's working, what's not. That's definitely something that Cowork can do.
Cool. I imagine that's one of the challenges, is like you have all these tools now, just which one's for me. By the way, the Chrome extension, I use it all the time. It's amazing. I want to drill a little bit further into the growth org. Yep. There's this whole meme on Twitter the other day of just like, you have one growth marketer driving all growth at Anthropic. And it's like, okay, that's crazy. What's like, how many growth people are there? What's kind of the rough org structure of the growth team?
We're roughly maybe 40 people now. And so we are, I think, structured very much like a traditional growth team, in that we have sort of horizontals of growth platform and monetization, who think about the sphere of growth across the entirety of our products. And then we have more sort of audience focused growth pods. You can think about like B2B growth. You can think about Claude Code growth, knowledge worker growth, API growth. So really like these audiences to keep a narrow focus, which is the thing you have to do when you have so many different products. And then these horizontals that sort of think about things across the board.
And is it across a team of engineers, designers, PMs? What's kind of like the functions within this growth org?
Yeah, it's engineers, designers, PMs, data. I think that overall the shape of the org is quite similar to, I'd say, a traditional growth team. Probably the things that are maybe different is that I think that we index a lot more towards larger swings as opposed to smaller optimizations. Like if I think about a traditional growth team, I would have probably done maybe 60-70% of my time on small to medium bets, 20-30% on larger swings. And I think that for us, we flip it a lot. Like we do much more the other way, where it's sort of 70-30 or more like 50-50 rather than indexing towards smaller bets. That's probably like one of the biggest changes, I think.
Just to highlight that, what's interesting there is at the scale you guys are at, like a 1% win is massive in the scheme of things. So it's interesting that even at the scale you're at, you're not focusing on these micro optimizations.
It is easy. Like you could easily focus on these small optimizations and then you tally them up at the end of the quarter and you're like, look how much impact we made. And like, you could do that.
Another billion, no big
deal. But the thing is like, we've been tracking at 10x year on year. And we that's like the thing that we sort of keep in mind. And I think it like ultimately comes down to our fixation of this company about the exponential. I think if you look at anyone who's talking from Anthropic about basically anything, we always talk about the exponential. Like is effectively as model capabilities continue to grow on an exponential, and the tools around them enable a better job of diffusing that into useful use cases. You basically just keep unlocking new markets that where the value of those markets significantly dwarfs what the value of the previous markets were. And like agentic coding is a great example. Like it didn't exist, a year and a half ago. And then now just the value of agentic coding is bigger than the like previous market of AI coding use. And so I think that is like the core thing here, which is that the future product value is an order of magnitude higher than it is today. And I think about, I don't know, like a normal business, like a number of companies that I've maybe mentioned, or like you think about like a trading app or like a grocery delivery product, like many of these, like the leading companies are great businesses. But if I think about what is the product value that a company like a standard, like call it a grocery delivery app, like what is the product value you get as an end user today versus 2 years from now? I look at it as like, okay, in 2 years from now, even if you're shipping all these new products, as an end user, the value you get from that product maybe goes up like 30 to 50% if the company's done a really good job of shipping new features. It's not exponential though. And so if I think about, okay, you're here today, in 2 years, you're going to have 30 to 50% more product value. Then as a growth team, the like relative differential of the product value 2 years from now relative to today, I can actually capture like a decent percentage of that with the small to medium optimizations that typically have higher conviction as opposed to like larger bets. But for Anthropic, it's not really that way where because of the exponential and our products being like very, 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 the product value coming from AI, the product value that we will deliver in 2 years' time is probably like 1,000x, 100 to 1,000x what it is today. And so if I think about that, and it's like, there's so much value on offer, you need to shift more towards, okay, we need to take larger bets and we need to not sort of miss the forest for the trees. And so that's why we still do all the smaller optimizations. It really matters. And like no one else is going to do some of these things. And so we need to do it. The compounding value is not immaterial, but we do take on much larger core product-y type of swings as well. So you mentioned that the Chrome extension, like that is now the thing that underpins a number of use cases on Cowork and Claude Code as well. And that's something that the growth team built. That's like a very like AI-pilled product that is like a very research-heavy product, but we were just bullish on it. We had an engineer who was very bullish on it, and we were just like, hey, no one else is doing it. We're going to do it. And so that's the sort of thing that I wouldn't have done at another company.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. So one takeaway here is like, there's like stuff to extract from your advice that is like only true at Anthropic. And then there's what can other companies learn from this experience that you've had. So one is your sense that if you're working in AI, shift more of the pie chart towards bigger bets, because in the future, the opportunity is so large, you want to find those as soon as possible versus micro-optimize?
To be more specific there, I would say that if the primary value that your product delivers is underpinned by AI as a central element of it, then I think you should operate this way. So I don't know, companies like Lovable, Cursor, all these like great businesses that are like, it's as the exponential rises, their value props are also going to continue to rise significantly. Like if you're building a product where it's an AI first product, then I would definitely operate in this way. I think if you're building a product where it's not necessarily an AI first product and you have some AI features that are on the side, but it's not the core of your value, I don't know that I would operate this way. It would it would depend on how is the rest of the product org staffed and how is the growth org staffed in relation to that.
Okay, awesome. And then in terms of the way you're structured, I thought that was really interesting. It's like a combination of different sorts of things. So there's like the API growth, there's Claude Code growth, but then there's also like personas, like a vertical of like knowledge workers and B2B. Is that intentional? Like some specific bets and one just kind of like broad market opportunity?
When you have like one product, it's easier to have a growth team that's more like purely on the funnel, right? It's like, you have the conversion, you have activation, you have monetization. But as you start to get into having multiple products, I think that's harder, because if you do that, then, if you just have like one activation team, for example, but then you have Claude Code, you have Cowork, you have all the other things, they're very different audiences and they're very different sets of cross-functional stakeholders internally. So we're kind of looking at what is the thing, and all org structures are like not perfect and they're like right for a point in time, but we're looking for what is the structure that allows us to have as much focus. Like focus is a really big thing, and on audience and problems, and also the tie-ins to cross-functional partners is really, really important. Like the folks on our Claude Code growth team, like they work extremely closely with Kat and Boris and the others on that team, and so that tie-in is really important as well.
So you've done growth at a lot of different companies, a lot of basically, let's call it traditional growth before Anthropic. How else is growth as a function and as a skill set changing with the rise of AI products, AI startups?
I think if your core product value is very backed by AI, then it is shifting where you're skewing more towards larger bets as opposed to smaller, medium experiments. I think in other things, it may be a big thing related to this that I think will accelerate this, which I am really interested to see how it will play out, is we are starting to look at how do we automate growth, which I think is like a really interesting area. So our growth platform team, we're very lucky. We have like Alexei Komisaruk, who teaches growth engineering at Reforge, and he's just like the guy on the team. And so he is driving this effort. The name is it's a little cringy. I didn't come up with it, but it's called CASH, which is Claude Accelerates Sustainable Hypergrowth. I did not come up with that, but really it's an effort to look at how can we use Claude to automate growth experimentation. And it is still very, very small. It's still very, very early. We kicked it off only, I think, a couple of months ago. I think before Opus 4.5, it wasn't really possible. We were just like not seeing the results. And more recently with Opus 4.6, we're like, okay, this is like headed in the right direction. And so this, I think, it will happen more and more across the industry, where basically, if you think about, okay, I think this can happen all across product, but growth teams in particular, because there's this whole body of work that is very small optimizations, I think are just more inherently suited to like tackle this earlier. I think if you think about like the life cycle of shipping, there's sort of 4 parts to it. One is identifying opportunities, like how good is Claude at actually identifying opportunities based on different trends, based on previous trends that Claude has seen in the past. Second is then building the actual feature and getting it ready to ship. Third is testing and ensuring that it meets your quality bar and your brand bar. And then fourth is then, once you've actually shipped the thing, analyzing the data, gathering the learnings. If you think about that as like the loop of, okay, these are 4 things that you can eval and hill climb on each of these areas and understand how good is a model doing for you there. And we basically think about it in that like the four ways. And we are scoring how good is Claude doing in each of those areas. And so we've been testing this with pretty small scale right now. It's been a lot of copy changes and some like very minor UI tweaks. It's delivering results, right? Like, and it's like you can push it, press play with it, and it's like it ultimately prints money. Where I'd say that the win rate is like, I would expect a senior PM to do better. Like I would say, like, if this is like a junior PM, like 2-3 years in, I would say this is like the win rate that I would expect from like a junior PM. But it's not quite at the senior PM level. Although I think like you look at the exponential, this wasn't available at all a couple of months ago. So it's getting better, rapidly. And I think that it's going to change where you'll be able to do this for larger and larger types of experiments. But then, you think about the largest types of experiments, I think that I mentioned the 4 pieces around sort of identifying opportunities, building, testing, and shipping. The one I didn't mention there, Lenny, is cross-functional stakeholder management.
There's still a need for human brains.
Yes,
there it is.
And like, I think that one is going to mean that, like, in my eyes, the work of PMs is like not going away actually anytime soon. And that piece, especially for larger projects, you don't need to do as much of it for smaller stuff, right? You can skip it, but for larger stuff, that piece is not going away.
Until the other stakeholders are their own little agents running around.
I think that's right. I think that would be the point where it changes. It's funny. We had like a difficult meeting a couple of weeks ago, and me and our head of design, Joel, we were debriefing afterwards, and he pings me, he's just like, Amal, we will have AGI, and it will still be impossible to get 6 people in a room to get to a line. And I'm like, yeah, I think I can see that.
That's what's the harder alignment problem? Oh, okay. This is so interesting. And this is exactly where I feel like things are going. So just to be clear, what you shared here, there's basically this tool that comes up with experiments to run to help grow Claude and all the tools. So it comes up with the idea, somebody looks at them, proves, cool, let's do these things, builds it, ships it, tests the results, see how it's doing, and then it comes back like, here's things that are working. Is that roughly right?
It's roughly right. And like right now we have human in the loop approving, but like the amount of time, I kind of think about scale in this way of just like week on week, are things getting better in each of the areas? Are people spending less time on each of the areas? Are the results getting better in each of the areas? And as long as like week on week, that's getting better, then you're like, okay, this whole initiative is like scaling. And so that's roughly right. But you can think about it as, I think a lot of this can be automated where human review is not needed. So like, we care a lot about brand, right? So that is something that we do look at right now. We don't want to be shipping something that goes against the brand. But then, you can have a skill that contains your brand guidelines and very clear yet do's and don'ts on brand. And so all of these types of like accompaniments, I think, are going to get better. The model is going to get better at understanding how to use them. And so over time, I think that the need to like human review this really, really decreases significantly.
Yeah. And you could always unship it if it's like, oh yeah, that was actually not a great idea. And that's such a good point that we think we need people to do these things forever. And it turns out, okay, a skill could do this really well. Here's our brand guidelines. Here's our vision. Here's our mission. Here's our goals. Here's what matters to us. Okay, let's not ship that thing. So the reason I think this is so interesting, this is like, I've just been watching the expansion of AI doing more of the product development process, in this case, the growth process of just, okay, it went from helping you write code to like writing all your code to reviewing your code. Now it feels like, what are the other ends of this, the two ends around this? It's kind of going from the middle out. The top of that is coming up with what to do. And then there's like the alignment stuff, still very hard. And then on the other end, it's reviewing the code and then shipping it. And then Git distribution that's like a whole other thing I want to talk to you about. So what I'm hearing here, and this is exactly what I thought was going to start happening, is AI is now getting really good at telling us what to do, not just taking our orders and building it. And it feels like the growth version of this is where it starts, because it's so much simpler. Just like, not that growth is easy, but just like it's data driven. There's this loop that you talk about. So I think this is such an interesting sign of things to come across just generally product.
Yeah,
just right. Putting that out there. Okay. So something that I'm constantly thinking about along these lines is just the future of product PM engineering, how those roles shift over time based on the stuff we're talking about. How are you working together as a triad? And where do you see these roles going? What's most going to change, do you think, across these three roles?
This is like something that we talk about and think about frequently, and the picture changes rapidly. So sometimes when things break, execution, like the bottlenecks break, historically in the past, it's like, okay, now you need to hire more engineers, you need to hire more designers, etc. And it's more just like a life cycle thing of like, where is the life cycle of your team and that specific pod to identify where the bottleneck is. But now when things break, you need to still look at it of like, okay, is it like the actual ratio, or is there also underlying technological shifts that are also causing this to break? And so that's like an interesting thing. I think that smaller companies, like if I'm at like a 15 or 20 person company, I'm like the only PM there working with some designers and engineers. I think in the smaller companies, you'll see probably like the biggest blend where like the PM will be doing all sorts of, they'll be, designing, shipping, etc. And I think you just have extreme bifurcation. At larger organizations, more scaled organizations, I think the jury is still very much out. Like you speak to people even internally here, and different people in different teams have different views of like, okay, how much are these roles coming together versus how much are these roles going to be separate? I think that, and it's not to say like even the PMs, like number of PMs are shipping and like themselves shipping and pushing PRs, etc. But if I look at across what I'm seeing, I think that it's clear that while PMs and designers are getting more leverage from AI, engineering is getting the most leverage right now. I look at tools like Claude Code, and like the amount of leverage engineers are getting from them is higher than I think the amount of the leverage that designers and PMs are getting from them today. Now that this like rapidly also changing, but that to me is like my view today. And so, if you think about a default team, which is say 5 engineers, 1 designer, 1 PM. With Claude Code, that 5 engineers is like 2 to 3x, right? And the PMs and designers have also increased, but that now they're managing what is effectively a much larger group of engineers. And so even though like the headcount and the org structure hasn't changed, you're now just dealing with a situation of maybe 15 to 20 engineers in the old world, 1.5 to 2 PMs, and like maybe 1.5 to 2 designers. And so we're seeing that that's putting like a lot of strain on PM and design. And it's not everywhere. Like I look at teams like Claude Code, and I think that, or because that product is so technical, like it's probably like just the right thing where the PMs are like all basically engineers themselves anyway. But we had a product, like a PM lead on site the other week, and we were all just like talking about this, where across the board we're feeling this, where PM and design is just squeezed. It's just absolutely squeezed. And we're like, is the right thing here? We just need to actually hire like a ton more PMs, and that could actually be where we land. On growth, how I think about it is like, one, we are hiring a number of growth PMs. We desperately need people who are very, very good, and we are hiring. So if you are excited by what we're doing and you know growth, please feel free to apply. Would love to chat. And
maybe craft an amazing cold email to you.
Yeah. Feel free to craft that email. So that's one, is I think we are going to be hiring a number of PMs. But then the second thing that we do is we very much hire product-minded engineers. I think this has always been the best thing to do in growth. Like you always want to have the engineers coming up with ideas, etc. And so we, especially people who can really like step in as mini PMs if the PM is absent. And so we're like basically more formally leveraging that right now because we are so stretched. So the frame that we have is that if a project is 2 weeks of engineering time or less, then the engineer is on the hook to effectively be the PM for that. And so that means things like talking to security, talking to legal, talking to cross-functional stakeholders, and the engineer is very much driving that. The PM will get looped in and they'll advise if needed. And if something is like wildly going off track, then they'll step in, but they're much more in an advisory capacity versus execution. If a project is more than 2 engineering weeks, then the default is that the PM should continue to be on the hook for making that go well. They'll still delegate more to Eng, but they're like squarely accountable. It's not like fully clean cut. It's like, use your head. Like if this is a 1 week thing, but it's extremely controversial, like the PM should probably still drive it. But that I think is like the approach that I expect more companies will start to do, which is just deputize the engineers to be mini PMs. Now, not everyone can do it, right? So the PMs, the engineers who are more product minded, suddenly their value goes up significantly, like an order of magnitude. And then I think we will probably still be hiring a lot of PMs.
There's so much interesting stuff I want to follow up on here. Okay, so one is this idea of 2 weeks. Just briefly, I always joke as a PM, you can go on vacation and be away for like a couple weeks from your team and things are going to be all right. Like there's like a momentum, there's a plan, people keep operating. And it feels like that's kind of this rule of thumb you use of just, okay, if it's a 2-week project, you'll be all right without a PM, you can handle it. I love that those two connect. Okay, the other here is so interesting. So you're saying here that because engineers are so accelerated, and this all makes sense, PMs and design are kind of just like, holy shit, it's like hard to keep up with this pace of engineering. And what you're saying is you need more and more PMs to keep up. That's one route, or it's engineers that can PM essentially, which It's so funny. It's just like, okay, great use for product managers until more of the PME stuff can be done by AI. But that's a really interesting trend. I don't know. Is there anything else there? Just like, oh, wow, we actually may need more PMs. The ratio of more PMs, fewer engineers might be the future.
Yeah, I think this is like it just like really depends on the industry, the size of company. Like any company where you're building something that's like much more developer focused, like you're going to rely on the engineers a lot more. Earlier companies, you don't have as much of this like cross-functional coordination, stakeholder alignment nonsense that you need all these PMs for. So you can like get by with less. But then as a company scales, and like if I think about, okay, now you have this ratio where maybe the 1 PM became 2 PMs from like productivity, that the like 5 engineers became like 20 engineers, the 1 designer maybe became like 3 designers. If you think about like what is the best use of time for that PM, I think this is like a really interesting thing of like how much should PMs be actually shipping things themselves versus everything else. I think like in the world where you're like limited on engineering, the PM should definitely be shipping things. I think in today's world, it's a good way to like get an understanding of the tools, which is really important. So the PM should be shipping for that reason. But if I'm one PM or 2 PMs and there's 20 engineers, I think about what is the incremental value I can add with my time, and is it actually shipping like the 21st PM feature? Or is it saying, how am I getting a little bit better at guiding the team on what the right opportunities are? And so that's where I think like in this world, you may have all these engineers who are like mini PMs, and the better that happens, like that's like where I would love to be doing more of. But still, like if you then get a really good PM who can come in and can like improve that, the like why and the what and the why and the what particularly by like 5%, that is like such a high leverage hire.
This is such an interesting insight you're making. It's like so counter to how a lot of people are thinking PM is evolving. Like what I'm hearing here is because PMs are so behind, because engineers are just getting so much done, there's like many people here, okay, you need to be prototyping, you need to be shipping PRs as a PM. What you're saying, which I completely agree with, is your time is much better spent helping PM basically and helping the engineers become better PMs themselves. And the leverage there is a lot higher than you spending time coding, shipping PRs in most cases.
I think that's true in certain circumstances. I think that as a smaller company, I don't know that that's the case. In a smaller company where it's all hands on deck, I think you probably need to be shipping. I think if you're in a company where like budgets are very tight and engineers are very tight, and you're not able to just hire because money's unlimited, then like you need to do what is needed to accelerate the impact your team's going to have, right? So there's going to be a number of cases where like as a PM, the right thing to do is to be like, screw it, I am shipping and like I am going it the whole way. But I'm talking here more about the like larger companies, more scaled businesses. Yeah, if you have 20 engineers, is it the highest use leverage of your time to ship an extra feature, or figure out how do I up level everything that we're doing, get the user insights better, etc.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element of shipping to learn, building a prototype so that you can have a better opinion. Like a lot of people talk about just going to try 3 things, see how it goes, and that'll help inform the roadmap. This is now the PRD, is look at it instead of talking about it. So there's a lot of value there still.
That's very true. I think that's a great point. So like even for me now, where we've got a number of PMs, we've got many engineers, there are certain times when I'm like, I want to articulate the idea I have in my head. It's just better for me to prototype it and show it, right? So I think that is really important. And then we are very scrappy. So like we're like a big company by name, valuation, but we're like extremely scrappy, and just the focus internally, just like minimize bureaucracy and just go. And so probably 70%, maybe 60, 70, 80% of what we ship does not have a PRD. I'm like averse to PRDs. I think I just like hate documentation. I'm just like go, just like cut the blockers. 20, 30% of stuff where it's like, it's important. It's really important to get right. Like the documentation should be really good, and like that people should spend a lot of time on it. But by and large, I think PRDs are just outdated at this point, and you can just kick things off with a good team without needing to do that sort of thing.
Say more about that. What do you do to help make sure, because people can build so fast or spend a lot of time going in the wrong direction, ship things that are not what you're asking? How do you kick off a project and clarify, here's what we're doing? Is it just a conversation or is there anything beyond that?
It really depends on the size of it. And this kind of goes back to like the 2-week thing. So why we have that 2-week thing, it's more like how do I have some filter to say, if we're investing heavily into something, we should apply more thinking behind it, versus if it's a smaller set of investments, just go for it. And as a growth team, again, you do have a decent amount of these smaller things that you do. So for very small changes, like, oh, there's a thing coming, we need to have an upsell for it. What is the thing we're doing? Like, this is just on Slack, right? This is just purely on Slack. It's just a messages back and forth, and I think it also depends on having a good caliber of engineer in there, but the engineers can understand, like, hey, I know you said this, but like, what about that for the audience? And so like, we're lucky we have good product-minded engineers in that sense. But all these smaller things are very much just on Slack, back and forth, and that's what you do. For the larger things, I think I very firmly believe in like a proper kickoff. So we still do. There's so much going on at this place. No one's got time. No one knows what's going on. And so doing a cross-functional kickoff, get legal, get safeguards, get everyone in the room and just be like, this is what we plan to do. What do you care about? What do you care about? What do you care about? Like that 30-minute meeting for larger things is just, I think, still so important to just streamline all the mess that may happen later if you don't do that work early on.
What's your approach to crafting that PRD in those cases? Is it like ramble into Claude? Do you have a template?
Even in those cases, there are times I don't craft the PRD, like, because everything's moving so quickly, right? So there's still some of those cases where I just set up the meeting, and then like 5 minutes before, I'll put it into Cowork, like, here, some of my thoughts, what credit, like, here are the things that I need to think about, spin up like a basic doc, and we use it to talk. Other times I won't even have a doc. But if I am creating a PRD, I have basically a skill that I view they've created. And then there's projects with all the previous PRDs in there. And then it's pretty simple. Like it has the format down. So I'll just say, here are the things I care about. Here's the why, here's the problem, and flesh out the key considerations, flesh out the cross-functional stakeholders, those types of things. But again, my default is like, if I can avoid the doc and if we can just jump to action, then that's what we should do. And increasingly just jump to prototyping the thing.
Yeah, that's where I think it'll get so interesting once we can automate more of that. Just like your assistant talking to the legal assistant, just like ironing out all these little, what's important to you, what's important to the...
Yes, and it's coming. And I think the legal team has done like good enablement around this. Like we work, versions of like, how do you can think about like, how can you mimic what someone might say and like set up, like a corpse, right? So there's things like that I think that we have now. And then as Claude gets more and more context and gets better at passing long context, I think these are things that Claude will just get better at knowing. One of the things, Lenny, is like a slight tangent, but one of the, I think, most effective ways I use Claude, or most interesting ways I use Claude is, which I see a number of people doing internally, is to like help you identify misalignment. This is like, I think something that's I found really, really helpful. So with Cowork, you have the Slack MCP, and you can tell Cowork, to say, basically, look across Slack, the projects that I'm working on. These are the things that are top of mind. Go and find me areas of potential misalignment right now. And it does a really, really good job. So this is something that I've scheduled, runs every week. Claude's like looking at things and coming back to me and saying like, hey, I think these things you should be aware of. And so you can think about in that shipping context, it's a similar thing where Claude can basically be looking at what's happening across the company and say, you're thinking about shipping this thing, here's who you need to talk to, here's what you need to keep in mind.
That is so cool. I am so excited to tell you about this season's supporting sponsor, Vanta. Vanta helps over 15,000 companies like Cursor, Ramp, Duolingo, Snowflake, and Atlassian earn and prove trust with their customers. Teams are building and shipping products faster than ever thanks to AI. But as a result, the amount of risk being introduced into your product and your business is higher than it's ever been. Every security leader that I talk to is feeling the increasing weight of protecting their organization, their business, and not to mention their customer data. Because things are moving so fast, they are constantly reacting, having to guess at priorities, and having to make do with outdated solutions. Vanta automates compliance and risk management with over 35 security and privacy frameworks, including SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA. This helps companies get compliant fast and stay compliant. More than ever before, trust has the power to make or break your business. Learn more at vanta.com/Lenny. And as a listener of this podcast, you get $1,000 off Vanta. That's vanta.com/Lenny. I feel like there's this what are the jobs of a product manager, and then how are they slowly going to be supported/done by AI? So there's this misalignment, just find misalignment, and then maybe one day it'll be align people initially. You talked about this cache automation for growing. How do I grow this product? That's starting to happen. Another that I use myself when I'm building stuff is just asking, how do I make this product better? How do I make this a better user experience? And asking the AI to just give me a bunch of ideas, and they're actually really good. So it's interesting how these little pieces are starting to be put into place to do more and more of this role. I'm curious what other automations you have and your team have that are effective. What I love about these conversations is you're basically living in the future. You're working in the most bleeding edge company with the most talented people, with the most cutting edge tools. And you can see where things are going and start to actually live in the future, build things that nobody else has even thought about or can do. I'm curious just what else is working, what else your team has done to help save you time, be more productive.
We use it pretty extensively across the board, right? So there's a standard PM stuff like writing docs, brainstorming, looking at data. For data, I personally have a coworker runs on a schedule and looks at sort of 20, 25 different charts every morning. And then, so when I come in the morning, there's just so many charts, so many products to track. Cowork will tell me, okay, here are the things that you should pay attention to. Here's what is concerning, and here are just some interesting insights.
And it sends you the update in Slack, or what's kind of the workflow?
For me, it just shows, it comes up in Cowork, right? So Cowork has a schedule.
In the desktop app.
In the desktop app, you can have a scheduled task that you create. And so I have a bunch of hex links that it will go and look at. It uses the Chrome extension for some things, and it uses MCP for other things. And then it'll just give me a summary. And then I know, there's a few charts that I just like to look at because I'm a numbers guy. I just like charts. So
they're all up and to the right too. So that
I'm just
nice.
I like to see the chart. But then there's a long tail of things, and even the medium tail where it's you don't have time to look at it every day. That if Claude is proactively looking at it, and you start to feel good over time of, okay, it's the false positive rate is going down, the false negative rate is going down of the things that Claude brings to you. Then you just get a little bit more of confidence and peace of mind there.
This touches on an idea I've always had that teams will have is a strategy bot, which just imagine an agent that's just constantly watching metrics, the market, the roadmap, what's working, what's not, and just hey, Mol, here's what I think we should do now. Here's the pivot we should take. Here's where we're going to win. It feels like we're very close to that.
I think we're close. I think we'll get there later this year to the point where that's very, very effective. That's my gut. I think that level of proactivity and looking across a bunch of context and distilling insights, I think it's the thing I mentioned earlier, Lenny, about the alignment piece. That's a version of it. Right now, you're just looking at across more data sources. This is something that I use. So I talked about some of the standard PM stuff, brainstorming, data, UXR. There's a lot of admin stuff. I just hate life admin and paperwork. I just hate it. And so I get Claude to book my meeting rooms. I don't book meeting rooms. Claude archives sort of my email first pass at clearing out my inbox. I don't do any of my reimbursements and expenses. Claude will go to Benepass and file the reimbursements. He'll go to Brex and file the expenses. So all of that side of things, I'm just just hand it to Cowork, just get rid of it. And then the stuff that's quite interesting, I think, is the manager lens where I talked about alignment is one thing. So I look also across my direct reports. Claude can look into what have they done this week. You look at sort of our team goals and OKRs, look at the transcripts from our discussions and understand. I can basically ask Claude, what are the key takeaways and observations I should keep in mind, and like what feedback do you think I should give them? And that's something that is like, again, you can just set that up weekly. The quality is like hit or miss right now. It's like, it's decent on some things. Sometimes you're like, holy shit, like I am so glad that I caught this. And that's very, very helpful. And then I do that for myself as well. So I basically, one of my manager, Ami Vora, was, I think, a podcast guest of yours, right? So I say, hey, based on what you know of Ami, both publicly, she's written extensively about product, and then internally, and then our discussions, what is based on everything that I've done or not done this week, what feedback do you have for me as Ami? And like, I get that every week, right? So like a lot of these things can already be done today. I think that as the models improve, I think it's just like the accuracy and the signal of these things is going to continue to improve rapidly.
I don't think you realize just how much awesomeness you're sharing here. This is just like every one of these is like, what? Okay, so this Ami example. So you have one-on-ones with her. Do you ask Claude Cowork to go through all of her writing, basically build like a model of her, and you ask, what should I be doing differently based on what you know about Ami? Is that the approach?
Yeah, it's effectively, there's a number of ways you can do this. I think if someone has a public profile where they've written extensively, it's helpful because Claude can just get all that information. Otherwise, you can have a project or you can have a skill. But increasingly, Claude is better at just understanding, because you can tell Claude, like, look on Cowork, you can say, using the Slack MCP, look at everything that this person has said in the last week, etc. And based on that, like, what are their top priorities? What are priorities my manager has based on how they're spending their time that I don't know? And so all of this layer of stuff, which is like I think about it as like soft coaching. I think that is like unlocked, in my opinion, already. I think it's just that you're like working with a coach who's like kind of like drunk at times, not drunk, but like, like sometimes like says something, you're like, why would you bring that up? Like, that's clearly wrong. But the other times you're like, wow, like that there's like one of the guys, Scott, who leads our enterprise team. I think there's a few cases where it's like he found like major areas of misalignment that would have caused teams to sort of spin their wheels significantly or do overlapping work. And you think about that, the impact of that, like your shipping in this world is bigger companies is going to be constrained often by all the cross-functional coordination, right? And I think we're now starting to see at this cross-functional coordination layer, some of that work, AI is really being able to be used to reduce that toil. And I think that 6 months ago, that wasn't possible. And I'm like, shit, like 6 months from now, what is going to be possible there?
Oh, man. And I think the fact that all this data is there, Slack, there's Granola or whatever people use, like all these notes from conversations and discussions are really key to this working.
Yes.
So for someone that wants to do something like this, how do you set this up? What's kind of the steps?
Yeah, you go on to Cowork, download the desktop app on Cowork, connect the Slack MCP. That's where you need to, depending on how big the organization is, you may need to get sort of team or enterprise admin permissions to someone with those permissions to enable that. But once you have the Slack MCP connected and on Cowork, you just ask Claude. That's it.
Amazing. Okay. I want to go in a kind of a different direction. I want to talk about the focus that Anthropic has had over the years. So if you look at the numbers that you're all putting up, what's really incredible about it is the focus that you all have had. And I think this is the reason it has worked out so well. There's a certain competitor in the market that is realizing they should have done this and are starting to shift to a similar approach. As an external observer, it feels like Anthropic has been very good at doing very few things, but going super deep. So B2B, for example, just going deep on B2B, and then going really deep on coding use cases, Claude Code being an example. And it's worked out really well. Who's been driving that focus? Who has helped keep that focus from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a foundational part of the company. I think it's been there from the very, very early days, and it really comes from leadership. And I think they've just done a phenomenal job of distilling that. I think that I saw this doc come up recently. I don't know where it was shared. It was something that Ben Mann is one of our founders he had on the podcast had written. It's dated in 2021, I think a few months after they started the company. And it was like, here's why we should just focus on AI coding. And this is like 5 years ago. This is long before anyone knew what the actual market opportunities were around this. And I think this is just like a deep focus that we have had internally from the start on the importance of coding and B2B. I think there's like two lenses to it. It's like maybe a view of, okay, that this is going to be commercially beneficial to tackle. And then also the side of it around accelerating research. So I'd say it's a pretty mainstream view now. I've now heard people from various labs talking about the importance of coding to accelerate research. But that has just been like a very firm view that we have been laser focused on internally of, okay, if you have the best models, that's going to accelerate your researchers and that's going to accelerate the research loop. And I think that's something that like Dario has seen very clearly for a number of years. So I would say that's probably one of a lot. I think a lot comes from Dario. I think a lot comes from leadership and just our DNA. I think the second though is probably just like necessity, where if you're it's now changed. Like we're a more well-known company, raise lots of money, blah blah blah. But historically we were very much like the smallest, least well-funded player in this space. Like in many ways, it's a complete miracle that I think we've like gotten to the stage that we have. Like we didn't have the free cash flow or the distribution of a Meta or Google. We didn't have the first mover advantage of an OpenAI. And so like, what do you do, right? I think there's like this broader principle I have just around life of like the freedom through constraints, that when you have a bunch of constraints applied on you, whether that's in personal life or at work, I think that can bring a lot of freedom because it just frees up all this excess choice. So you're like, okay, like this is clearly the path. And I think for us, it's like, okay, you don't have a ton of funding. You're a small player. You don't have distribution. You just have to really pick a very narrow focus, and even for a very generalizable technology to maximize your chances of getting to escape velocity. And I think that's also just related to like how history played out, right? So it was well before my time, but Anthropic had a version of Claude. We had a chatbot before ChatGPT was launched, and we had ultimately chosen not to launch it for safety reasons. I think the team didn't want to kick off effectively like an AI global arms race, and ChatGPT launched, and like they got like insane traction, right? And that just naturally sort of pulled them towards consumer. There's another world where if Anthropic had launched Claude first, like maybe it'd be the other way around, even with all that focus stuff. So who knows? It's hard. It's always hard to say looking back with some of these things.
Wow, I didn't know that. I think also people just don't realize how far behind Anthropic was. Like right now, it's like, of course, they're amazing. But like, I just remember when people were talking about Anthropic, we were raising money. I was like, there's no way they're going to compete with OpenAI at this point. It's like so over, just like they're so far ahead. And it shows the power of focus and just, I guess, I don't know, all the things y'all did. Like it is absurd how far y'all have come and how successful and how things have changed so quickly.
Yeah. And I would say, I very much agree. I think a lot of that, comes down to our leadership team. We have a number of people who've worked at call it like the best companies, in the world, very senior people. And I think almost uniformly, everyone's like, this is the strongest leadership team out of any of those companies. And so I think a lot comes from them. And then we're just very lucky to have incredible people. I think that helps a lot as well.
On the coding piece, just to make sure that part is clear, I never thought about this, that the reason that the bet was so deep on coding is not just that's a huge TAM, but it's that this is a feedback loop that will accelerate us further and further. So if we get the best at coding will help us do research, it'll help us build better models, and it'll accelerate faster and faster.
Yeah, that's correct. And this is something I checked. Dario has talked about this publicly, so I am fine to
like, okay, it makes sense. The safety piece is really interesting. So I want to spend a little time here. So famously, Anthropic, I think the official name of Anthropic is Anthropic, an AI safety research company. As a growth person, there's this balance I imagine you strike between growing and the mission being don't grow at all costs. Our goal is AI safety and alignment. How do you balance those two things? How does that impact your job?
Look, I think it's something we take very, very seriously, and it's the whole reason the company exists. And if you think about it, it's all the way from it's why they left to start the company. It's deep in our corporate structure itself. So historically, everyone raising money is like go create a Delaware C corp, and that's like the structure you do. And with a corporation, you have a fiduciary duty to maximize returns for shareholders, maximize shareholder value. And from the beginning, they went a different way. We went and created a public benefit corporation, PBC, which allows you to legally say that maximizing shareholder value is not the like overarching umbrella goal of this company, and you can optimize for public benefits. So really, I think it starts from there, and it ladders down from there. For us, our purpose, our mission ultimately is to make sure that the transition to powerful AI goes well and is net beneficial for humanity. I think internally, like we are like very excited, and I think honestly we're like very, very optimistic about where this can go, but we also understand what the risks are. And so for us, that top line objective of this needs to go well for humanity. This just needs to go well for humanity. That is something that we are happy to take a significant commercial hit for. And we've done that time and time again, right? So like we have back then, okay, you had Claude, but you don't want to release it because you're like, there's these safety risks. And so there's time and time again that I've seen we've been happy to take that hit, and it's actually worked out well for us in other ways. From like a growth lens, I look at it as like growth teams can often push the boundaries of what is like good user UX, etc., because they're trying to very, very much like eke out metrics at times. When I think about if a controversial test is brought to me, I sort of look at it as like there's two types of tests that are controversial. One is when that test is so controversial that you just should not run the thing because the results don't matter, because you would not ship it for a combination of brand and sort of customer friendliness and values. And then the second is where it's like it's controversial. You're like, I don't like it. I certainly don't love it, but it's like it's not like a red line. And so you're like, if someone comes to you with conviction and is like, I have a really good hypothesis around this, and you're like, I don't love it, but like you can run the test and see what impact it has. And if it's like a high level of like cringe or ick, then I want to see a high level of return for the result for that. I kind of think about everything in like, is it in one or is it in two? And for every company, that one and two is different. I think for us, the AI safety is like very much in one. I think that it's like, yeah, that's why we exist. Like, yeah, it's fine. We're just not gonna do this thing. I think then there's other things that fall into two where you're like heightened sensitivity, but we can try it and see what happens. I think zooming out though, Lenny, one of the biggest mistakes I feel like I see growth teams make, and particularly just like hardcore growth practitioners, is just trying to squeeze every last dollar. This is like, I think this is like a general principle also in life. Like if you're a founder raising money, you're just trying to squeeze that like last dollar. Like you don't want to do that because you want people to come back next time as well, is my view. And I think in growth, like I think it's really important that you just need to be okay leaving money on the table. And that's a core principle for us as a growth team, where we are very comfortable foregoing metric impact in order to prioritize safety, in order to protect our brand, in order to hold a high quality bar and to maintain a great user experience. And if you like look beyond the short term and like, okay, what are the numbers for this quarter? And you zoom out and you think about what are the very best products out there, you realize this is how they all operate. And that's actually the thing that's going to drive more growth long term as well. And so I think that actually ties back to safety, where as the risks get higher and the stakes get higher, I think the fact that we are taking a stance and safety is like critical to what we do is actually going to become a significant, competitive advantage for us that I think is going to help us in the long run.
Yeah, well, it's as you share all this, like clearly it's working. Anthropic is killing it. So I love when those examples, when someone doing something, someone approaching the problem that way, it actually works out. That's the same way I think about with my newsletter. There's so much more I can do to grow it. My philosophy is just focus on creating good content. Nothing else. Like all these micro optimizations are not going to matter in the end. It'll grow through people sharing it if it's useful to them. So, in a very small scale, I have a similar philosophy. One of the things that people are probably thinking about as we talk. So, we joke about like AI replacing parts of jobs here and there. Like, it is pretty scary to a lot of people. Just like, what is the future of my job? Will I have a job? How do I stay relevant in this future? So there's a couple questions here. One is just like for folks that want to thrive in this approaching AI future as a PM, as a growth person, do you have any advice, things that they should be doing right now?
To me, a couple of things come up. Like one thing that everyone says is like use the tools. You need to be on top of the tools. I think you need to be using Claude code. You need to be using co-work and understanding just each model release. What is the new things you can do with this? How can you apply this to your job? It'll work well in some things. It'll work terribly in other things. And then one model launch later, it's like, oh shit, that other thing worked. But if you didn't go back to try it, you would not have known. And now many months have passed and you didn't know that that was possible. And so I think that being on top of the tools is really important, both for improving your own productivity, but also for getting product sense around AI products. Which I think is just going to become increasingly important. I think then zooming out beyond that, I kind of look at it as like just leaning into where you have a competitive advantage and an unfair advantage. And so to me, it's like if, there are some people, some PMs who are really good at like craft, for example, and there's others who you throw them into a situation with all these stakeholders who have all these strong opinions. And you're like, there's no way they're going to mediate this. And they come out and it's like everyone's kind of swimming in the right direction. And so if you think about like what is the major skill set that you have where you spike in that can be tied to delivering, driving impact for a company in a product role, I would just double down on that and like almost like forget the weaknesses. Just what can you do to become like the best person at that thing? Because that's like very, very valuable. And I think that ties to the notion of just leaning into being interdisciplinary. So going back to some of what we mentioned earlier on, where it's like, okay, in this world of engineers are mini PMs, that the engineer who is like highly product minded is a unicorn, is an absolute unicorn. I think the same thing is true for PMs, where it's like, okay, if now, this in this ratio, if the designer's really stretched and you're a PM who can design, you are also a unicorn now. Like the chances of a company letting you go has gone down dramatically because you are now just so much more useful. And so I think that is just like really, really important. I think if I look at what's benefited me, it's probably a version of this. Like I think that for me, it came from a founder background. So like the mix of the founder background, the like finance, I was an investment banker. So like the finance background and numbers, and then sales, like I almost became an account exec instead of going into product. I was right on the edge of should I go into sales or product? And I think like a combination of those along with growth is probably what's led to like, there are certain areas and situations where I can just have outsized impact to other people. And so understanding what that is for you is really important. I look at our financial services product. We've launched like Claude for Sheets, Claude for Excel.
They kind of like tank the market, by the way, everyone went crazy.
I know. But like the guy running that, Nick Lin, like he came from investment banking, he came from private equity, and it just has such a competitive advantage where he's building that product and he's like, I know this. Like he's like built for this. And so I think just understanding what are those interdisciplinary areas you can lean into to make yourself more just like higher impact is really important. And then the last one is just being adaptable. Anyone who is trying to just keep applying old playbooks, I think you're going to make life a lot harder for yourself. So one of the biggest things you come into Anthropic is you need to understand that probably 50, 60, 70% of how you operate in the past, just throw it out the door. It's not going to be relevant. And if you try to stick to that, you're going to have a lot of friction and it's not going to be helpful. So just being adaptable and understanding, okay, the job's changed this way, I'm going to go that way is I think like it's so important.
That is awesome advice. It matches a lot of what Jenny shared when she came on the podcast, the design leader on Claude and Cloudwork and all these things of just like the idea of going deep, becoming the best or one of the best at a very specific thing. and that not every company will need, and you don't need all 10, but just going deep and on something. I forget how she described it. Mark Andreessen said the same thing, just like, I think we called it a sideways E instead of just like T-shaped of one thing. If you could have a couple things you're really, really good at, there's a lot of power to that. Oh man. Okay. Before I get into something that I think will blow a lot of people's minds about how we actually met and kind of a big part of your journey, let me just ask you this. Is there anything else about Anthropic that might be worth sharing, might be worth talking about?
The thing that maybe comes to mind is just like our culture and the people that we have here. I really think it's our secret sauce. I think it's the thing that is the most defensible, the thing that no one else is going to be able to replicate. And I don't think it's an accident. Like leadership has really invested in this a lot, and Daniela and Dario, they really believe in this a lot, and I think they've just created a very special culture. So I would say that, this is like truly a mission-driven company. And I was not 100% sure of that when I joined. Like, I was like, I think that this is an exciting company. I like very much agree with their principles, but I didn't know anyone at the company. I didn't have any references on what it was like inside. So I was a little skeptical when I joined. I'm like, at least they're talking about it, but like, I don't know. Are they serious about this? And then I came in very early. I was like, oh shit. Okay. Like they are, maybe they're even more serious about this internally than they talk externally. And so it's just like it's a mission-driven company where people viscerally understand both the upsides and the downsides of the technology, and therefore understand the divergent ranges of how this may go for humanity, and how different of a future that could be. And I think like when you understand that, of how different this could be as a future for all of us and like our children and our grandchildren, etc., I think it leads to a lot of passion for what we do, and it just leads to a lot of belief in what we're doing. And so I kind of look at every other job I've had in the past, and there's some degree of people at the company who are just checked out, where it's like, I'm here, I'm sick of this, but I don't have a better option, or I'm getting paid too much to leave, etc. That is just like not the case here. I have not met a single person. I'm saying like not even a single person who's checked out. Everyone is putting everything they have on the table. Everyone is pouring it out and like leaving nothing behind, and is just fully in it. And so I think that leads to like this, releases energy that is just like very, very hard to describe. I think you have that energy, you have that mission driven nature, and then it's such an open culture. So leadership is very, very transparent with us on things. We Slack is like it's a whole maze. There's so many things that play out on Slack. We're very open. Everyone has these notebook channels where you kind of have like your own like Twitter feed in a way where you're just talking about your thoughts about things. And so you can go and like join the Slack channel, the notebook channels of people on research and all these other areas, and like you can learn whatever you want, and you can spend so much time like getting lost in that as well. But that openness where we even encourage like people can just argue with Dario. There was an all hands, he said something where someone didn't agree, and the person goes onto Dario's notebook channel and just says like, hey, I didn't appreciate how you said this and this and that. And then it sparked a whole big debate. But like that sort of thing where like it's encouraged, like go to leadership and disagree with them, challenge them publicly, and like that, I think that just leads to a level of trust, and all of that together, I think it just means that we have this very, very deep sense of togetherness that, man, I've never experienced anything like it. And then you get to the talent, right? I think that is the thing where the talent density is like, I feel like I'm playing for like Real Madrid at times. I look around, I'm like, oh, man, I'm playing for Madrid, where it's like, you just like have the best people in the world. I think it's most the case on research. We have like the very, very best researchers in the world. But even you look on like product, we have Ami Vora, like she is phenomenal. We have Mike Krieger. You're like, okay, casually started Instagram, he's here. On growth, we have John Egan, who is my engineering counterpart. He's like the OG in growth engineering. He's great. We have Alexei, so like guy who teaches growth engineering at Reforge. He's just like another dude on the team. And all of that, I think, is just very special. think my favorite here is like in the Lenny, a couple of months ago, we had our on-site, company-wide on-site, and in October, and I'm walking around, I see this guy, he's just walking around eating popcorn by himself. I go up to him and I'm like, "You're Jeff, right?" And he's like, "I am." And I'm like, "You are literally the US ambassador to my country, Australia, and you're just an employee here." I'm like, "This is insane." I'm like talking to our prime ministers of our country and all these things. And it's just the talent combined with that culture, I think, is just this secret sauce that is the reason that I think we are as successful as we are.
This notebook channel is so interesting, just like as a tactical thing. So the idea there is Dario just shares, it's like a little Twitter, like internal Twitter feed where folks just share what they're thinking about and what their priorities are and things like that.
Yeah, that's basically it. Where it's an internal feed where it's not just Dario, everyone has one, and you share your internal thoughts. It's a way to like keep people updated on things, on what's working. It's a way where people share provocative things. I think from like a leadership level, and we also think about that as it's a way to scale your beliefs and views across an org as it grows quickly, right? So like if you're now adding a lot of people in the organization, you need to think about, okay, what are the like behaviors that we want to model? What are the principles that are top of mind to us? And if you think about like, yeah, you can have a bunch of these meetings where you talk about it, you can model that behavior, but if you have a channel, which is like, here's my top of mind, and you say these things, right? Like if I have a post, which I did the other week of like, this is the importance of being comfortable leaving money on the table. Now all the new engineers on growth who've joined have seen that and they're like, oh, okay, well, this is like different to what we've known before, right? So I think it's like good for the openness, but it's also good as a leader of how you can scale your views as an organization to like get people more up to speed on the way that things are done, which is, I think, really important to like avoid that drift, which when you have so many new people signing up, that drift can lead to a lot of drift in strategy and sort of perception. So it just helps run a tighter ship in that way.
And more importantly, the data for the agents everyone's got running to help them work with all these humans.
Yes, that is very, very correct. Like it is something that goes to Claude, you know, that there are certain documents in onboarding where it's like the HR team has written, before editing anything on this document, please check with this person because this is a document that Claude references as like a key thing, right? And so more and more these types of things of, okay, how does the growth team think about this? How does safeguards think about this? You're arming Claude with that context to get better and better at helping in the future.
That's interesting. It feels like that's something that every company is going to have to start doing, is just sharing their thoughts in a structured way so that all these agents that we've all got running have what they need to know. Another interesting side note here is just Slack. Okay, so like there's all this talk of SaaS tools being replaced by AI, and you guys use Slack. I think there was this famous tweet of you guys still use Workday and all these tools, all these SaaS tools. Everyone's like, what? Like they're all going to be vibe coded out of existence. The fact that you all, at the cutting edge of what could be built with code, still use Slack and all these other tools. To me, that's a good sign that maybe SaaS companies will be all right in the future. I don't know if you have anything there to share.
Yeah, I think it's a really complicated picture, right? Like there's a number of things that we just build internally ourselves. As time goes on, that, you know, the ability for Claude to do that better increases. And at the same time, like we use Figma a ton, we use Slack a ton, we use Workday, we use a lot of these products, and I don't see that changing in the immediate future. And so, yeah, I think like there's probably some truth to some of this. I think the other parts are like it's overblown, and many of these products, they're customers of ours. We value them a lot as customers, and we use their products very, very heavily. And I don't see that changing.
And you have better things to do. Like who's going to spend time building a Slack like that is not where value is going to accrue. And I think it also helps you see how sophisticated these things are. They're not just like, you know, like there's been teams thinking about these problems for a long time. Anyway, that's a whole other tangent. Just coming back to the values thing, I just want to highlight something here that's really important. A lot of people criticize Anthropic for talking about the dangers to humanity, throwing out all these numbers about jobs going away, just like creating all this fear. But like, and people think it's, oh, we're trying to raise money, or we gotta get people's attention, or we're just trying to like create headlines. But everything I've ever seen internally is always just, this is what we believe in. We want people to know what it might be coming, even if it isn't bad. We want people to understand here's what might happen, and we are trying to avoid it. And you might say, why is Anthropic even building AI? If it's so dangerous. And the understanding Ben shared is just like, we think it's better that we go at this and try to build it the right way versus just stay out of it and just hope that nothing bad happens.
Yeah, I think three things that come to mind there. First is I go back to something I said earlier, which is that we very much think about things from an exponential lens. And if you are thinking about things from a linear lens, you'll see the world very, very differently, right? Because you look at where we are today and you're like, okay, but like how much better can it be in 2-3 years? I think if you're looking at it from an exponential lens and you understand how exponentials work, then you just realize that like a lot of this stuff is actually going to be happening sooner than people think if you're looking at it from a linear lens. And then if you understand that that there could be upsides and downsides and the range of outcomes here, you need to I think we very much need to be talking about the downsides so we can avoid them and push towards the upsides. I think most people at the company are optimists. We're very optimistic about the future. I think it's just we understand the risk is it is not a guaranteed that we end up in a good place, and not enough people are talking about the risks, I think, in productive ways. And who have the know-how of the risks. So I think there's people who may talk about the risks but are not in the game, and so they don't actually know fully. They're not surgical on what the specific risks are. But we're in the game. We understand what's happening, and so that's one piece. I think the second is I think we actually believe in this stuff more strongly than we say externally. So it is just such a key part of how we think internally that sometimes we need to reword your statements, because it's people might just think we're being too over the top, but internally that's how we think, and what we're putting out is a softer version of that at times. And then I think the third piece is going to what Ben said, where we think a lot about driving the race to the top. And so it's if you're not in the game and you're shouting from the sidelines, no one cares. It's just the reality of how the world works. No one really cares. If you're in the game and you're a leading player, and what you're doing is working, you can influence people who are also in the game to take the right actions. And so that is the core of it. If we just pack up and go home, you have no influence on this thing. And if you stay in the game and you're commercially, you're doing great, and then you have ways to influence these are the principles, and put that into the conversation and make more people sort of believe in those things.
I could talk to you forever, Amol, but 2 more questions just to round out the conversation and touch on some stuff that I've hinted at a number of times. One is I want to take us actually to failure corner, because someone listening to this may be like, all right, look at this guy, just worked at all these amazing companies, cold emailed the CPO at Anthropic, got a job, joined this rocket ship. It's all been up and to the right, just killing it constantly. What's a story from your career where things didn't work out, when you failed, and what did you learn from that experience?
I have a couple. I think it's very much not that way. I feel like it was a lot of squiggly lines to get here. The biggest I'd say is just founding a company, raising a bunch of money, having employees, and then having to shut it down and tell your investors that you've lost the money, and that you had a vision of what you're going to do, and that it's not going to happen. And so that, I think, is probably the biggest one. We spent 3 years on it. It was not we tried something part-time. It was no, we went for it. We had spent 3 years, raised a couple of mil. We had maybe 7 to 10 employees at our biggest, and it was something that we really believed in. It was around mental health and how you can quantify mental health to help understand or get early predictors of things like generalized anxiety, major depression. So stuff that we really, really believed in, but ultimately, we were in our early 20s. We had no idea what we were doing at the time, and many things I do differently. But that was just a very, very, very painful process. I think the good thing was we kept our investors in the loop the whole time. So to any founders who are struggling out there, send those monthly investor updates. It's really easy to send those when things are great. It's really hard to send those when things are bad. You just bat it down, and you need to sit down and send an update to your investors about why everything you talked about last month did not go to plan. But it's just the right thing to do, and it keeps people in the loop, and it avoids surprises. But it's still so tough when you're then calling up the investors to be like, hey, like we're shutting down or making that decision, everyone who believed in you, and it becomes such a big part of your identity. It's very, very tough. So man, that was just brutal. Like it's brutal. And it took me, I think, like a number of years to truly get over. I think that it's a tough thing, but you get so much from that experience that is hard to see in the moment. And I think without doing that, I would not have gone into this. I was not a PM before. I didn't have any of these skills. I'd never worked on products. I didn't know how to cold email really. And so it was through that job that I learned a ton of the skills that made this career path viable for me. And it's just really hard to see that in the moment when you're looking at a point in time. It's much easier to like draw the line looking back. But I think that'd be my like takeaway is just keep in mind that it's a long game. And some of those things, like I'm so grateful for that experience now. I'm so grateful that it failed and went that way. Actually, it's very painful because it wouldn't have led to what I'm doing now. And so it's just it's a tough thing, but the positives can come from it.
What I love about this is a lot of people have these times in their career where they're like, it's all over. Like I failed in such a big way and my reputation's screwed and people were counting on me and now they see I'm an imposter. I never knew what I was doing after all. Now they finally see. And just seeing that, and this was 3 years, I'm looking at your LinkedIn, you had 7 employees, something like that. And then it's like Masterclass, Mercury, Anthropic. I think it's inspiring to hear a story like that, to know that you can have a big failure like that and things can work out. That is not the end. Okay, so in 2023, I was going to go on pat leave because my wife's pregnant, and I was just like, wait, what do I do with the newsletter? I need to take some time off. That would be really nice to take a month or 2 off. And so my plan was, okay, I'm going to do a bunch of guest posts where people line up. I put out a call for guest posts. People apply. I pick a few and then I kind of slot them in ahead of time so I could take time off. So I put out this call, hey, who wants to write a guest post for my newsletter? I got 500 plus applications. One of those applications was from you. And the pitch was essentially how a traumatic brain injury made me a better product manager. And I still remember reading the first draft you sent me and I was just like, holy shit, this story is incredible. It's just like you feel such feelings. And it was just so tactically interesting and useful. Like, oh, wow, this is actually going to make me a better product manager. Share the story of the brain injury that you went through and just the journey that you went on there, because this is going to blow people's minds.
It was the toughest time in my life. It made shutting down a company be like, oh, that was nothing, actually. Just funny how perspective works that way. Back in early 2022, I had a traumatic brain injury. So I'd done MMA for many years. I'd done Muay Thai, which is a type of martial arts, for many years. Never had a problem. And it's just like the one of the things that happens, like the wrong session, it's just a normal day of sparring, nothing crazy. You get the wrong hit to the head in the wrong way. And my whole life changed. And basically I spent 9 months, I was off work for 9 months. The first couple of months were brutal. It took me roughly half a year till I was comfortable walking again. It was very, very difficult. The first 2-3 months, beyond just showering and going to the bathroom, my wife did everything for me, like including like texting my friends. I would listen to music for maybe like 20 seconds and feel like I needed to vomit. I couldn't look at screens at all. And it was a very, very long recovery. It was not clear to me that I would ever work again for a while, actually. And it was like, we'd even discussed with my wife, like, what would we do in that case, etc. And we had to think even on those levels. And through a lot of pushing and really working through myself, and you have to just slowly increase your tolerance to things. It's a brutal process, but you need to slowly expose yourself to different things and just get better and better at each little thing. Actively work on that. Don't push it too far. Otherwise you have a big setback. It basically got to the point then where it was over 9 months, and then after that I returned to work, and then it slowly got better. And the part, Lenny, you don't know is, we in mid 2023, we posted that newsletter, and a month later I got re-injured, actually.
Oh, wow.
And because, and when you have a brain injury, until you're 100% healed, your risk of another concussion or brain injury is elevated. When you're 100% healed, your risk falls down to that of a non-concussed population. But until that time, and like even if you're like 95% healed, you're not 100% healed. And it was just an innocuous sort of in everyday life, getting off a plane, a bag sort of hit me on the head type thing. And I was off work for 2 months when I like 1 month into joining Mercury. Like 1 month in, I'm like, sorry guys, I need to peace out for 3 months. And that then it was a very, very long recovery from that. And I'm actually still not 100% healed. So I'm like mostly good, but I have times when I have like dizziness and headaches and other things that I need to work around. Overall, I feel like it's one of the best things that could have happened to me. And I think that keeping that mindset helps. And there's a point when you can like take that too far when that view is detached from reality. But I think it's just made me so much better and more effective as a person. A lot of the same habits, like I don't drink alcohol, I don't drink caffeine. I have to do a bunch of these things for my physical health. I just have to do them. So I keep doing them. I take breaks. This is like a really big one. You might think even in a place like Anthropic, like how do you survive in this way? It's like, even on the craziest days, Lenny, between the start of the day and lunch, and between lunch and the end of the day, I take a short break. Even on the craziest days with like model launches, etc. I'm lucky we have like a meditation area in the office that I'll go to, and then the whole side of things around meditation that I talked about in that post. I think both you and I have done a retreat at Spirit Rock, and doing a meditation retreat changed my life, and it's something that I do at least once a year now. I have one coming up relatively soon as well, and just I think all of that has helped with better managing the physical side of it, because this job is very taxing, and then emotionally having a little bit of space to what happens. Like you have sort of awareness on one side, you have the reality on the other side, and reality is crazy here, man. Like reality is insane. Like there's so much happening every day. There's so much noise. It's mind blowing. And so that relationship between awareness and reality, that's where you have choice, that you sort of learn from deep meditation on how to shift that and apply your choice there. I think that is the thing that has helped me significantly with just keeping a more level head. I think a lot of staying in this game in this level of intensity is you just keep your head, just don't lose your head in like the crazy times. And I think all of that I've gone through has like helped me do this without resorting to like unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Wow. Amal, you're such an inspiration in so many ways. Just like there's so many reasons that you would not have been successful and things would not have worked out. And there's so many lessons to learn from just the stories you've shared and the journey you've been on to help people overcome challenges they're having. Like if you can like come back from an insane, was it like a kick to the head? Is that what happened? Is that
it was a kick to the head? That's correct. Yes.
Just like feeling like you may not be able to being able to listen to music, to just like leading growth at the fastest growing company in history. There's also just like a lesson here of constraints. Again, you mentioned this idea of just like the power of constraints. Like you're forced to take breaks. You're forced to go meditate like in a way that's really helpful. And it's like a lesson for us all. This is actually really good for us all.
Yeah, I think that freedom through constraints is like one of the big takeaways I've had during that time. And because when you have these constraints, you're forced to adapt, and it gives you in a business setting, you have to focus more in a personal setting. And like if the constraint is, I can't do anything and I'm injured, I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know I'm going to get better. You have two choices. You're like, one, are you just going to resist and like fight with reality and really suffer from that? Or are you going to accept the situation and like not let that affect you emotionally? And it's not to say like I did everything, man. I was like every single thing I could do, diet, exercise, I was like, I'm on it. Every action I can take, I'm on it. But then you have a choice of, are you going to let the impact of that define your happiness or not? And I think that's the thing when the impacts maybe are not coming, you have to then adapt to, okay, what do I want my happiness to be? And one of the meditation teachers said like the true freedom in life is learning how to be content when you don't get what you want. And it's not to say you shouldn't do something when you don't get what you want, but I think that takeaway of just, can you be content and like not have your happiness rely on getting something, I think it's a challenge. I'm not perfect at it, but I think it's probably one of the biggest takeaways from that whole thing.
Incredible. And we'll link to the post if folks want to read this. Before we get to a very exciting lightning round, is there anything else you wanted to share, or should we just jump right in?
I think we can jump into it.
We covered a lot of ground. Okay, here we go. I've got 5 questions for you. First question, what are 2 or 3 books you recommend most to other people?
It probably ties to a lot of what I just talked about. Like I think a lot about meditation and my emotional state. That's what I spend most of my time thinking and like reading and researching and working on outside of work. So my recommendation is very related to that. The first is a book called Joy of Living by a Buddhist monk. His name's Yonggi Mingyur Rinpoche. It's just really about how you can start to think about your life experience in a different way, and have tactics of what to do to kind of change just how you think about things. This is one where like I've recommended it to people. It's not like, I've recommended it to a lot of people and they've really, really enjoyed it. I think another one is Awareness by Anthony DeMello, which is a kind of similar thing, but from a different angle. Those two I consistently recommend to people. And then the third one is more relevant to product in many ways, is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. I think just being able to break down a situation when someone's like, I don't know, it'll get done in time. Okay, like, can you put a number to that? Like what percentage likelihood is it? Those types of things I think are just so tactically helpful in product.
Favorite recent movie or TV show?
I think movie is probably Marty Supreme. It's one of the only ones I watched recently. I thought it was great. I thought it was just insane, absolutely insane movie. It was ridiculous, but I loved it. TV show, I have not watched TV in a while. I think it's probably the Olympics would be the one, if that counts.
Is there a product that you love, just like, I don't know, when you discovered recently, or just when you have in your life that's like, oh, this is very cool, people might want to know about it?
Yeah, so this is a funny one. I was in Japan last week, and I was sleeping in this hotel, and I just really loved the pillow that I had in this hotel. It was very random. I've at times had like neck and upper trap pain, and sometimes I've been frustrated with my pillow because I sometimes sleep facing up, sometimes sideways, and like the height's not quite right. And I was just like, this pillow is just great. And basically this pillow is like, it's full of beads. And so you can like naturally shift the height of the pillow while you're sleeping, like even like unconsciously without thinking. And so I like looked at the tag. I was like, what is this? I ordered it by Amazon Japan, and I brought it back with me on the plane. And so I have the name here. It's called the Maruhachi Shinsui Maruhachi Pro Pillow, and you can only get it in Japan, but they ship to the US. No affiliation, and I think that has changed my life in like the last week.
That is an awesome pick. Do you have a favorite life motto that you often come back to in work or in life?
Main one I'd say is just, she'll be right. This is a very common Aussie saying. It's like, she will be right, she'll be right. It's a common Aussie saying when we're faced with like a tough or difficult situation. You're kind of like dismissing the severity of it in a way by saying like, it'll be fine. And I think that's just like such a good metaphor. It's such a good like tactic in many, many cases. And then I think the other one is just like, sometimes in life, you just have to go for it. And that is something that this guy, Eros Resmini, who is the CMO of Discord, who is a very close advisor to me as a founder, he would push me on this. And that was something that he would often say, is just like, just go for it. And I think it's a very helpful thing of, you can sit there thinking, should I do this, should I not? And sometimes in life, you just have to go for it.
I love the combo of those two. Sometimes just go for it and she'll be right. So good. Okay, final question. Okay, so I'm curious, used to be into martial arts. That didn't go great. Do you have a new hobby that you find yourself loving? Do you make time for hobbies?
I think I'm just like quite tight on time for hobbies. I would say I think it's largely just like work and have my body function, and then like, take care of the most important relationships around me. I think maybe the one hobby I'd say is just, I'm really into sports, and I've gotten more into sports, football in particular.
Like
I'm
watching,
certainly not playing. My wife's from Michigan, and she took me to a game at the Big House, and it just changed my life. From then on, I was like, I'm a Wolverines fan, and big Wolverines fan, big 49ers fan. I just love football, so that's probably the one that comes to mind.
Amal, this was incredible on so many levels. I'm so thankful that you made time for this, considering how much you got going on. Where can folks find you online? Say they want to apply for a job maybe on your team. Where can they find that? And how can listeners be useful to you?
You can find me on my LinkedIn. It's just Amal Avasare. I'm boring. That's it. You can look online to apply on our jobs page, as it rolls across growth engineering, growth product, growth design. We are looking for great people on the growth team. So please come and join us. And I think being helpful to me is just two things: trying our products, giving us feedback, giving us harsh feedback in particular on what can be better, and then please send great people our way. We are looking for the best of the best to join the team, and we would love to hear from anyone of as well who could be a fit for one of our roles.
Dream job for so many people. Amol, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Lenny.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode. I love that you have a very strong opinion about this, which is just the state of the product management career and how most PMs are not that great.
Why is it that product management is still such a relatively undeveloped discipline? Like, we're like 15 to 20 years into this. And so there's something about the current state of product management that isn't getting at the truly important things, the truly value-added things. If we were doctors, you'd be like, that's totally unacceptable.
What's the answer, Sean? How do we solve this problem?
In everything, always talk from the customer's perspective, from the market's perspective, from the competitor's perspective. A very small number of PMs do that. They get dragged into internal politics. They get dragged into Scrum management or Scrum execution or product delivery, and you just can't win that way.
You kind of have this hot take that the way AI will most impact product management is data management.
Well, you've got this synthesis machine, which is this LLM thing that's going to help you do synthesis. But if it hasn't got all that data to do synthesis on top of, it's got nothing. And so that means that LLMs can only be as good as the data they are given and how recent that data is.
In the future, if you can easily clone a B2B SaaS app like Salesforce or Atlassian, what happens to these businesses long term? Do they just are they all in trouble?
People really underestimate where the value is created in these applications, and they just kind of get it completely wrong.
Today, my guest is Sean Klaus. Sean is Chief Product Officer at Confluent. Previously, he was Chief Product Officer at MuleSoft, which is a billion-dollar business within Salesforce. Before that, he was Chief Product Officer of Metromile, a public auto insurance technology company. And prior to that, he spent 6 years at Atlassian, where he ran the Jira Agile and also built the first ever B2B growth team. He also created 2 of the most popular Reforge courses, one on retention and engagement and one on data for product managers. Sean is awesome because he is both very tactical and execution-oriented, while also being very philosophical and insightful about the craft of product and growth. In our conversation, Sean shares why most PMs are not good, what it takes to become a good or great product manager, how he thinks about his career like a bingo card and why he indexes towards finding very different roles for every new job that he takes, why good data is the most important ingredient in AI tools and for product managers working with AI, also how to build a great B2B growth team, what he's learned about doing B2B growth, and his really interesting take on how AI will and won't disrupt SaaS tools out in the wild. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it in your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes, and it helps the podcast tremendously. With that, I bring you Sean Klaus. This episode is brought to you by Interpret. Interpret unifies all your customer interactions, from Gong calls to Zendesk tickets to Twitter threads to App Store reviews, and makes it available for analysis. It's trusted by leading product orgs like Canva, Notion, Loom, Linear, Monday.com, and Strava to bring the voice of the customer into the product development process, helping you build best-in-class products faster. What makes Interpret special is its ability to build and update customer-specific AI models that provide the most granular and accurate insights into your business, connect customer insights to revenue and operational data in your CRM or data warehouse to map the business impact of each customer need and prioritize confidently, and empower your entire team to easily take action on use cases like win-loss analysis, critical bug detection, and identifying drivers of churn with Interpret's AI assistant Wisdom. Looking to automate your feedback loops and prioritize your roadmap with confidence like Notion, Canva, and Linear, visit entrepret.com/Lenny to connect with the team and to get 2 free months when you sign up for an annual plan. This is a limited time offer. That's entrepret.com/Lenny. This episode is brought to you by BuildBetter.ai. Back in 2020, when AI was just a toy, Build Better bet that it could cut down on a product team's operational BS. Fast forward to today, 23,000 product teams use purpose-built AI in Build Better every day. First, Build Better uses custom models to turn unstructured data, like product and sales calls, support tickets, internal communications and surveys, into structured insights. It's like having a dedicated data science team. Second, Build Better runs those structured insights into workflows, like weekly reports about customer issues, context-aware PRDs, and user research documents with citations. It even turns stand-ups into action items that automatically get assigned and shared into your tools. Plus, with unlimited seat pricing on all plans, Build Better ensures everyone at your company has access to this knowledge. Truly, no data silos. In a world of AI demos overpromising and under-delivering, see why Build Better has a 93% subscription retention. Get a personalized demo and use code Lenny for $100 credit if you sign up now at buildbetter.ai/Lenny. Sean, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lenny. It's really awesome to be here.
I've had you on my radar for a long time, and I am really excited to finally have you here. And big bonus points for having a very beautiful, sultry Australian accent that always helps with the ratings, I think. I don't know if it's causal, but it's correlative.
I'm glad to be a bit of a curiosity.
So I want to start with something I totally believe, and I love that you have very strong opinion about this, which is just the state of the product management career and how most PMs are not that great and how there's a big opportunity to level up. You just talk about what you've seen there and you're just like thinking here.
Yeah, it's honestly like a big conundrum for me. I think it's actually part of, it's grandiose to say so, but a bit of my life's work. Like, why is it that product management is still such a relatively undeveloped discipline? Like, we're like 15 to 20 years into this thing, right? You would have thought that it would be less random than it is. Like, the outcomes are random, the behaviors are random, individual performance is random, seemingly, right? And so there's something about the current state of product management that isn't getting at the truly important things, the truly value-added things, the right way to think about problems, the right way to think through problems, the abstract reasoning that's needed. There's something that isn't working about it. I've spent a long time trying to put my finger on it and then be like, how do you reproducibly produce that? Like, reproducibly produce people who can really be really great product managers. The thing is that if you think all the way back to it, like, I spent a long time as an engineer, and people always talk about 10 times engineers, right? And I wanted to be a 10 times engineer. I'll leave it to others to decide, to tell you whether or not I was or I wasn't, but certainly I wanted to be. And I tried to be a really great engineer. And it must be true that if there's 10 times engineers, and I would argue there definitely are, there must be 10 times product managers too. But at the same time, those 10 times product managers, because product management is ultimately about leverage, so it's about helping other people have dramatically more impact than they would, if they were unorganized, if they didn't have somebody to kind of organize the goals and what we're trying to achieve, then that means that a 10 times product manager has 100 times return or more because they're 10 timesing the return on 10 times resources, right? So the outcomes are so wildly distributed, and the benefits are so good that you would have thought that kind of it would have behooved us. There would have been a way that this had evolved and improved and really gotten way crisper than it has. But here we are, I'm not saying that we haven't gotten better. We 100% have. But I think we could all say that we're not reliably producing, 10 times product managers every day of the week.
I love this point. And it's especially painful that when someone works with a PM that's not great, there's just this like meme of, why do I need PMs? PMs are useless. PMs suck. And it just creates no one's ever like, engineers are useless or designers are useless, but there's so many people are like, I don't need product managers on our team, never hire a PM. And it just sets the whole profession back.
When I first started out in PM, somebody, it's obviously a chestnut, but he pointed out that like realistically, when you're a product manager, your job is to say no to 90% of things that get brought your way. And so that kind of makes you the bad person pretty much from the start. And so you're saying no to 90% so you can say yes to 10%. And that kind of puts you behind the 8 ball right at the very beginning. And so you have to kind of very quickly get runs on the board. You have to prove to have the right insights, to have the right data, to make the right decisions, or you don't get another go. You don't get another swing. You don't get another swing at it. So it makes sense that, product managers are the easiest to kind of single out and kind of criticize. But that is also what makes it the funnest thing. Like, if you think about like, why do we do this? Somebody once asked me like, would you retire? Like, why do people do what they do? Because certainly at some point it isn't just about the money. And at the end of the day, product management is so damn fun because it's about trying to figure out an edge. It's like trying to look at the world, find the portion of the chessboard that isn't occupied, but that is valuable, and find a way to get into it, invade it, and destroy it. Like it's a really fun, like it's decisions under uncertainty. And that makes it unbelievably fun, like really, really painful and very frustrating and very hard to convince people, but very, very fun. So, in equal measures, basically.
What's the answer, Sean? How do we solve this problem? I know you said it's your life's work. What do you find actually helps most in helping PMs level up and become, say, 10x PMs?
I think the most important thing, and the kind of the chestnut that I repeat to everybody, is that at the end of the day, the time you spend looking inside the building doesn't really benefit you very much at all, right? And, Steve Blank and people used to talk about you should be spending 80% of your time thinking about things going on outside the building. You might not be outside the building, but you should spend 80% of your time thinking outside the building. And I would say that a very small number of PMs do that. They get dragged into internal politics. They get dragged into Scrum management or Scrum execution or product delivery, like elements of the delivery thing. And you just can't win that way. Like you just can't win that way. You can never get an A because you're fundamentally not solving the job. Like the job is not about execution or anything. It's about finding reliable, differentiated value, right? That you can uniquely deliver into the market. So I would say like, if there's one thing two things I would say actually that I generally guide product managers to do. One is to like always start from the point of view outside the building in every document, in everything. Always talk from the customer's perspective, from the market's perspective, from the competitor's perspective. And the people who listen to me on that, I would say get better almost immediately because they're starting from a place that's easier to understand. And then secondarily, be data informed. They like kind of use all of that view of the world, but don't just make up a bunch of statements. Like support that statement with anecdotes and bits of data. It doesn't have to be a treatise, but like kind of kind of convince everybody of what the world really looks like and what the opportunities ahead of the company looks like, and good things happen to you. And all of a sudden you go from a world where nobody wants to help you get anything done to where everybody wants you to win. Like they want you to win, and they may not give you everything you want, but they certainly will try because they're like, well, of all the bets we could make, this is a good one.
I imagine many people listening to this are thinking, oh, I am that person. I talk to customers all the time. I'm always interacting, looking at research, putting data together. And what you're saying is you're probably not doing that enough. Is there anything that you could help someone recognize of, no, you're actually not doing this enough and you think you are, but you're not?
It's one thing to say you're spending a lot of time looking outside the building. It's a whole other thing to like hear from the places you don't normally hear from. So avoid availability or confirmation bias. Like most of the time people go talk to the people they always talk to, and they learn nothing particularly new. They don't synthesize the results that they got from that conversation. They don't seek out the counterfactual. They don't seek out the proof that they're wrong. They don't analyze what their competitors are doing and figure out what that must tell you about the market. They don't bring back the data of how their product is actually being used versus how people say it's being used. It's like, kind of all data, no analysis is not very useful. Like all kind of, everyone can bring back an omnibus edition of random stuff I heard on a Tuesday, but the competitive advantage is extracted out of figuring out what other people don't see, figuring out what, where we're wrong, figuring out where a well-placed bet could have dramatically, outlandish returns. And so people, I think firstly, people often say that they do a lot of this stuff, but they actually don't, right? Because they don't have any structured way of doing it. So what they really mean is like every now and then I get in a customer call, or every now and then I get stuck into an escalation. And so they're kind of conveniently bucketing it. So firstly, they don't do it in a very structured way. Then they don't bring back analysis, they get true insights from that thing. So they don't really gain very much at all. It's just a more activity, no outcomes. Activity is not, people do far too much activity with not enough outcomes. And there just isn't enough time in the day to do that, to be successful.
You as a product leader is at the Venn diagram center of the sweet spot of where this podcast has been going recently, which is product and growth and how AI helps you with all these things. And so to follow a thread there with synthesizing and understanding what people are saying, user research and surveys and all these things, have you found any tools that you and your team have found really useful to help you do this more efficiently versus, traditionally just manually going through all the stuff and finding patterns?
Yeah. So firstly, stepping back a little bit just into the motherhood and apple pie portion of of qualitative research or whatever. I find that most people don't even understand or don't start with a rigorous foundation in what they're going to need to do to get the answers that they want. So for example, your listeners have probably heard about the Nielsen number before. But basically, the idea is that once you interview between 7 and 14 people, you stop learning new things. Less than 7, you don't learn enough. More than 14, you stop learning anything new. And so if you interview 2 people, you probably don't have enough data. If you interview 22, you probably had too much. So like they don't even right size their efforts. So that's a problem. So they don't start that way. Then they go into these conversations asking leading questions, which really are designed to get the customer to say what they already want to be true, which is like, so they haven't done enough research or they've done too much, and then they've blown up all of the results before they've even heard anything. Like, so, if you don't right size your research and you don't kind of set this up to learn, then you're going to lose. Like no amount of applying LLMs or any type of kind of structured reasoning is going to help you, because you're reading back what you want to hear or some weird summarized version of what you want to hear. But stepping back from all of that, like what I like to do is, specifically getting to LLMs, is like I think that we live in just the most amazing time for product managers right now in terms of being able to analyze vast quantities of information and see the common threads. And so let me give you a few examples of that. Right, one might be you can do a bunch of customer interviews. You can put a bunch of customer interviews into ChatGPT, and you can say, "Hey, ChatGPT, this is my strategy. Tell me where my strategy does not fit what these customers talked about." It's all about the not where it does, where it does not. Like people spend far too much time looking for what they're hoping to see, not for what they're not looking to see. So you can literally ask ChatGPT to help you find where the customer's probing at the edges of what you're trying to do, where it's wrong, where what you're saying is not what they believe. And you can ask it questions like that. You can ask it where what your customers are saying would better fit what your competitors are saying. So you can basically say, hey, you can copy and paste one of your competitors' positioning documents into ChatGPT and say, is this a better fit for what they have said than my thing, which is you can summarize your own strategy. Like you can take your competitors' public documents and you can ask it to summarize what their strategy probably is. And it's actually surprisingly good at that, because mostly your public documents are actually a summary, or at least a derivative of what your strategy is. So it will give you crazy insights into what other people's, literally their product strategy, at times creepy, like, oh, they will probably do this, they will probably do that. It's more likely they would do this than they would do that. And so like normally that type of insight was hard won. Like, it's like, it took a lot of sweat work. You basically had to read a lot of stuff. You kind of had to use your brain as like this big kind of summarization machine. And eventually you knew what you felt about all the things you had read, but you couldn't summarize why. LLMs let you get to that really, really, really quickly in a very structured way, but only if you push at the edges, provoke the answers you don't want to hear, provoke the problems, like try and prove to yourself that you're wrong, I think is the easiest way to start trying to use some of these tools.
I love that. And it sounds like in your experience, you're just using straight up open AI, ChatGPT, Claude, not like any specific tool for user research for this specific use case.
No, mostly I find that like the straight up LLMs themselves are good enough. And we do have some internal tooling that we built around, I don't know if you've ever had Sachin Rekhi on the show. You may have. He was a product leader, pretty well known in the growth community, and he was a leader at LinkedIn for a long time. And he kind of he used to call this concept a feedback river. And he basically said that really smart product managers are constantly swimming in a feedback river. They set out to surround themselves by a feedback river. And I really deeply believe in that. It's like, okay, how can I surround myself with, user interview data, with direct customer feedback, with NPS data, with competitor information? Like I'm always kind of trying to wash myself over with information. And where I'm going with this is that LLMs and tooling based on it can be exceptionally good for this. So, for example, at Confluent, we get a ton of inbound customer requests, as you can imagine, coming from the field or directly from customers. We use LLMs to take in those asks, to summarize what they're about, to find other asks that are like that one, like really in a compelling way, like a real way, like a semantic way, not other words that exactly the same. Are these the same concept? So that we can look across all of the inbound demand on us and say, well, the most popular idea is this one and it's getting more popular. The least popular idea is this one, it is getting less popular, in a really deep, rich way, even across hundreds or thousands of pieces of inbound feedback. I think it's a really great time to be a product manager if you can put these types of tools to work. But they don't do the job for you. They just help you do these things that are, intricate in that job of finding the gaps, finding the opportunities, finding the common threads without, necessarily having to do all of it just inside your wetware, just inside your brain.
I'm going to stay in this AI river that we're in right now and ask a couple more AI-ish related questions. And this may be what you just said, but I'm curious if there's more here. You kind of have this hot take that the way AI will most impact product management is data management and data versus like models you're building or anything else. Can you talk about what you've seen there?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two implications for people as they're building products based on AI and as they're thinking about like AI in their workflow. So let's start with the first one, because that's how product managers do product management things. You just asked this question of like, should it be specific tools built for, to make AI easier for product managers to use? Or is it in fact like more general models being put to work? At the end of the day, like these models are very, very, very smart, but they're also like insanely dumb. Like, and everyone knows that, right? Like, insanely dumb. In other words, they really only know what they were trained on or what you bring to them right at that moment, like in that millisecond, and then they will forget it immediately. And it's very easy to convince yourself that that isn't true, but it's actually what really matters. And let me add one extra piece that makes that really important. At the end of the day, information has a decay rate. So think about customer feedback. It has a decay rate, or what your competitors are doing has a decay rate. So any new piece of data decays in its value to your decision making very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. You can plot your own decay chart if you want to, but the answer is very, very quickly. And so when you think about the job, which is synthesizing all of this very complicated information to make good decisions, what does that mean? Well, you've got this synthesis machine, which is this LLM thing that's going to help you do synthesis. But if it hasn't got all that data to do synthesis on top of, it's got nothing. And so that means that like LLMs can only be as good as the data they are given and how recent that data is. They're ultimately like information shredders. They're like they are limitless information eaters. Like they just can't be. You can never have enough information to give to an LLM to truly gain its value. The more things you give it, the better it gets. Broadly speaking, that's kind of just not perfect, but that's close enough. And so what that means is as an internal product leader or, putting LLMs to work, you need to figure out how to bring as much information about customers or their asks or your competitors, all of it. How much can you find all of it and bring it together and give it to the LLM, either in your tooling or even in just copying and pasting or whatever your flow is going to be? That's one thing. But then if you take it beyond that and you go, okay, well, now I'm a product leader and I'm building an app and I want to put AI in my app, what will make my AI experience really great? It's definitely not going to be the models, because like these models are mostly going to be somewhat replaceable. And you could say, okay, well, is it going to be the prompts? Maybe, but certainly good prompts are better than others. And you certainly that's kind of an ongoing investment you probably want to make to ask better questions to get the LLM to deliver better answers. But it's obvious that the real answer is the context, like all the context you're going to give it, all the data you're going to copy and paste. And so if you think about, let's say I'm building I have no relationship to this, but let's say I was trying to build a human capital, like a HCM, a bot, like an AI bot. Let's say I was working at Workday and I was trying to bring in an AI bot. It's pretty obvious that the smarts of the bot would really be related to all of the employee information, but not just that. It would be the benefits information. It would be the legal situation in the country where that person is currently working. It would be the company's policies and procedures that apply to the. So you get what I mean by about like these kind of like the jumps of logic and the jumps of data and the way data is all linked together. If you want to have a smart AI experience, you'll convince yourself that all I really need to do is get a model and wire it in, and I'll build a little pipeline that will suck some data in and it will whack it into the LLM. And if you think that way, you're going to be very sad, very, very sad for a very long time, because you're constantly going to be wrestling with how do I get data to this thing? How do I get good data to this thing? How do I get timely data to this thing? How do I get well-structured data to this thing? And so, it's a data management problem. Like it's getting access to good data, getting access to high quality data, getting access to timely data, and getting it to the LLM to get the LLM to make a smart decision. That's where 90% of the calories go. Maybe it's a bit like Einstein's thing, it's 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. Nobody wants to hear it. Everybody wants to just think about what these really cool models and how smart they are, and the next one will be even smarter. But really, it's just the hard work of getting really good data to the LLMs to get them to do good things.
It sounds really obvious as you make this case. It makes me think about at the Lenny and Friends Summit, Mikey Krieger talked about how he had kind of the two types of PM groups within Anthropic. One was focusing on user experience product, and the other was working on the model research side. And they realized that all of the success came from the model research work, like making the model and the data they provided the model was where all the value came from, not just like optimizing the user experience. And they're just putting more and more of their product team on just that versus like tweaking UX and buttons and things like that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Something sort of related. I'm just going to ask one more AI question. I don't want every talk to end up being just all AI, but something that's kind of been a meme recently, and I know you have a perspective on this, is that AI makes it really easy to build products. So in the future, if you can easily clone, say, a B2B SaaS app like Salesforce or Atlassian or whatever your favorite B2B SaaS app, what happens to these businesses long term? Do they just become, are they all in trouble? They're going to be 100 Salesforce competitors. What's your sense and prediction of what might happen there?
Yeah, I think it's really weird. I think people really underestimate where the value is created in these applications, and they just kind of get it completely wrong. And I'm not sure like why that is. So like if you think about, so I spent a long time at Atlassian, so I worked a lot on Jira, which many people will know. And I spent a long time at Salesforce, so I spent a lot of time in the CRM ecosystem, the marketing ecosystem, and all the rest of it. If you want it to be like not charitable, you'd step back and you'd look at all those applications and you'd say they're all just forms on databases. You'd say that Jira is a form on a database, Workday is a form on a database. So Salesforce, they're all forms on databases. Like all vertical SaaS or business SaaS is ultimately forms on databases. And you'd be like, well, how hard can that be to replicate? And the answer is like unbelievably hard. And people just like you totally get it wrong, because it's not actually just about the data model. So if you think about if it's forms on databases, it's these beautiful user experiences that sit on top of data models, right? So whatever the object is, it might be a customer object or a campaign object or an employee object, right? You could say that, well, there's some element of lock-in in the object, like the object itself, like the fields of the object. I'm like, pretty boring, right? That's not very interesting, but sure, maybe, right? Certainly there's some value in being the system of record, like the default that everybody uses. There's definitely some value in the UX, like I want to be the best HR facing application for working with employee data. Yeah, there's some value there. But the real thing, which is staring everybody in the face, is it's all about the business rules. Like that is what drives the lock-in. Because like why do you buy Workday? You don't buy Workday for its out-of-the-box configuration. You buy Workday because you want to configure it to be, Lenny Inc.'s HR processes. Like it becomes Lenny Inc.'s Workday. It's not Sean Inc.'s Workday. It's Lenny Inc.'s Workday. And actually, the longer you have the software, the more it becomes that. The more it becomes less and less like Workday and more like your specific company, which makes sense because it was built to be configured to meet the needs of any specific company, and every company is their own precious snowflake. And as that happens, those configuration pieces, that bit that makes the application native and a fit for your organization, makes it a fit for nobody else's organization, and also makes it a black box to the point that you don't even understand how it works anymore. Like if you went to, for example, Salesforce and you said, hey, like, could you define all of the, processes by which software was sold inside Salesforce? They couldn't tell you that without reading the code of their Salesforce instance. Right? That's not a proprietary secret. That's obviously true because over time, that's literally how sales happen. There is no other way to do a sale other than through their internal tooling. And so what that means is that it's not the UI that matters, and it's not the data model that matters, although those are both very useful. It's the years and years and years of evolution of the underlying workflows of the product to support the customers, but also the customers evolving those workflows to make them work the way they do. And so how does that impact AI companies, right? You could say it's easier than ever to build a forms on a database application. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, that presumably drives the incremental value of every new one of those to zero, right? So probably leads to more power to the existing winning systems of record because there'll just be a gazillion competitors who are just more forms on databases. So like, how would you ever choose between them? You may as well just go with the winner. Nobody ever gets fired for buying Salesforce or whatever. You may as well start from the kind of the premier vendor. That's one element. You could go the other way and you could say, I've heard a few people mount this argument, which I think is really interesting, that at the end of the day, agents are going to take away most of the use of that user interface. So let's say, for example, your Salesforce with Service Cloud. I've heard people say, well, a lot of those service agents might end up being replaced with agentic workflows that will mean that, there is no person operating the UI. If the UI doesn't even exist anymore, then why do you even need Salesforce? You may as well just have raw database tables, and who even needs forms on databases? You can literally just have databases. But that also doesn't make any sense either, because the agents have to operate against the rules of the system. And the rules are defined by the business processes. So think about Salesforce without a head. Imagine Salesforce had no UI. It would still have those business rules that I was talking about. And those business rules are what define what the agent should do. They're always telling the agent what it should do and how the world can operate, what is possible, what is allowed. And so from my perspective, like this idea that this just completely destroys like the differentiation of these kind of business process SaaS applications just seems like a fantasy, crazy fantasy. The only way I could really believe it is if you said, well, like, you know, you could have a new startup that introspected all of the rules that are configured into a Salesforce to try and reverse engineer what your actual business processes are and then kind of operate on top of that. But the best placed people to do that would be Salesforce themselves, or Atlassian in Atlassian's case, or Workday in Workday's case. You know, I just can't see a world in which this, like, I think one of two things could happen. All this move into AI makes those applications even better, like even more unassailable. Like they basically get stronger. It makes the strong stronger, or it could enable some new level of like applications that come from a more platform-based thing, so less a domain-specific thing like HCM or ERP or engineering, or less of the domain-specific stuff. It could enable a more platform-like play where you have more business objects, and business objects have rules, and you could imagine a world in which like there's kind of a whole evolution of new, more platform-like SaaS applications that do more than one business function worth of the business rules and the way things move around in the enterprise. But that doesn't exist today. So you could say that could exist, and you could say it could be way better than we've ever thought of because of AI. Or you could say that the rich are going to get richer. Like the most likely outcome is that the currently dominant companies are going to get more dominant. But I don't think this idea that it would just cause a spring up of a whole bunch of new apps that will more easily challenge the incumbents makes any particularly. It's not straightforward to me how that would happen, basically.
Wow. That was extremely fascinating, and there's so much there. I can go in so many directions. One is, I thought you would actually go in this direction, which is distribution advantages become even more important. If it's easy to, like today, I could sit there and hire a team, clone Salesforce, might take a while, but I could copy it. But by the time I'm done, they've evolved, they're moving, they're adding features, they're ahead, right? You're skating to where the puck was. And so if that's the case, one of the ways to get anywhere is to have some kind of distribution advantage. Like it's one thing to have Salesforce as a product clone, another to get anyone to know about it, to adopt it, to sell it, procurement, all that stuff. So I feel, do you have a sense of like distribution advantages being even more valuable in that world?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly makes sense. Like ultimately, at the end of the day, distribution is always an advantage because the hardest problem is to even be in the consideration set for any given problem. Like the world is full of problems. It's just when people have that problem, they firstly don't think they're going to solve it at all. And when they do think of solving it, they don't think of you. So the distribution is always like an incredible advantage. But again, like in the world of AI, it seems like distribution is more likely to get hard than easy. So like, if you think about, for example, diminishing returns on cold email, because cold email is getting easier and easier to send even worse spam. Like it sounds better, but it's, effectively causing everybody to become desensitized to everything. I don't know if you've noticed, like half the LinkedIn reach outs now are all basically clearly LLM generated spam. I mean, like to some degree, it's actually worsening the signal to noise ratio. And so I think that a lot of the kind of breakthrough distribution mechanisms that startups often use seem to be getting more crowded just in general and more expensive. So that doesn't bode well for kind of, I'm the not as good Salesforce. I'm the not as good Salesforce, but I'm cheaper. It kind of has to be something different. There has to be some angle upon which you are materially better. And what I saw happening and what I've been seeing happening, and I think it's been really interesting, is a lot of modern, next-gen applications are bringing data as a first-class citizen into the workflow. And I think that that's pretty compelling, right? So like if you look at the next generation of, applicant management products that deal with, inbound job applicants, a lot of them now, like the latest cool ones, they include, your time to fill data. Like they include outcome data of like who's got the best hiring outcomes, who over what period of time has the worst attrition. Like literally all the way back to the interviewers and where the interviewers were in the interview cycle. Like so, basically embeds data into the whole life cycle. And I think that there are kind of these ways in which startups can bring these experience benefits by just bringing a kind of different approach to the world that does enable them to capitalize on traditional disruptive innovation. Like at the end of the day, this is just disruptive innovation. It means that most companies have overshot the utility, like the average utility. So you can win by meeting the average utility and being different. Meet the bar and be different. Meet the bar and be different is the way to cut through. So that makes sense. Like that's a half decent playbook. But if even for those companies, now they're going to have all these AI competitors who are using AI to engineer faster to build a competitor just like them as quickly as possible and start jamming it into the channel. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole thing evolves. It kind of got race to the bottom, characteristics around it. You're probably right that distribution is still the hardest part in software, particularly when you're getting started.
Right. So if you have some kind of clever unfair advantage, it feels like that becomes even more powerful. Say have a platform of an audience or something like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned this ATS product they really like. Is there one you want to give some love to that you think is really cool that you like, or you want to keep it anonymous?
Yeah, it's Ashby. It's the one all the cool kids are talking about now. And it's funny because like people literally talk about it in comparison to all the last generation of modern SaaS ATSs or whatever. And they talk about it in glowing ways because of the way they put data inside the actual workflow. So the actions and its outcomes are directly tieable to each other in the application you're doing the work in. I think that's a pretty compelling user experience.
So just to maybe close this thread before I move in a different direction, this point you're making about how valuable data is and how that's like at the core of being successful and differentiating in the future, especially with AI tooling and products. Any advice you'd give to someone that wants to do that? Is it just make sure you is it like have proprietary data? Is it like make it a first-class citizen? Like what's the advice you'd give to founders who are trying to do this, what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of all of those things, isn't it? Like if you have first-party data, but you can't bring it to bear, then it's not very much use. If you have third-party data and you bring it to bear in interesting ways, like the problem with data is like we're all surrounded by data all the time. Like so, the data's everywhere, right? What really matters is the right data at the right time in the right place, because we're all humans, right? And so to me, like there are obviously data advantages and there are even data network effects if you can end up in a situation where you have very valuable first-party data. But in any case, it's still about being able to bring the right data at the right place at the right time for those users for them to be able to get advantage from it. Like a little kind of segue, I guess, on that one is I spent I know I spent a lot of my career, like weirdly, actually, I've been a product person for a long time, but weirdly, I've ended up inheriting data teams. So I've actually run data teams at a lot of different companies, which is weird because product managers don't normally own data teams. I think it's because I have just like a really massive affinity for data. I've always been really I used to call myself data driven. It was kind of my jam, and because and in hindsight, I look back and I think like data is the opposite. Data is more like a compass than a GPS, right? Like if you look at data as a way of like giving you the answer, you're always wrong. You're always wrong, or you're slow. Wrong or slow, or sometimes both. Because mostly data doesn't give you the answer. It just tells you if what you just said is like ridiculous or there's potentially something there. So it's more like about disproving whatever you think. And you end up being slow because if you try and use data for everything, your brain is ultimately a data sifter or whatever. So the reason your intuition tells you something is because you've seen a ton of data that tells you that this is the most likely answer. And so being like data driven, being data obsessed is like, it's something you can easily overdo, very, 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 very easily overdo. So it's about right sizing data, having the right data at your fingertips, having the right kind of view on data, rather than kind of like trying to expect data to give you the answer, or trying to use data as a weapon, or trying to use data as a way to kind of force people to believe you or to go in your direction. But data is kind of at the center of everything and about how to influence and be successful in products you're building and arguments you're mounting internally and everything else.
I love that you went there. I definitely want to spend time on here. It's interesting you say that. There used to be data-driven like I'm Mr. Data Driven. You created the Reforge course, Data for Product Managers, and also retention engagement course on Reforge. And by the way, we'll link to these. You're still helping with these courses, by the way. They're still running. They're awesome.
Yeah.
People love them.
Yeah.
Great. So we'll point people to those. I love that you're also saying you're like, I think the way you described it to me before this is you're reformed data-driven PM. A lot of people say this. They're like, don't just do what data tells you to do. Use your intuition, use it as a guide. It's hard, like on the ground, to operationalize that advice. What's your, say like, to your PMs and your teams when they have data telling them, hey, this experiment is a huge success, or there's a huge onboarding opportunity, conversion opportunity here. I guess just like, what's your tactical advice to folks that have data telling them one thing and maybe something else telling them something else?
I think the first thing I always encourage people to do is to like look at a piece of data. If you're looking at a piece of data and the result tells you something that your intuition tells you is like insanely wrong, like you're probably not right, first believe your intuition and go and prove yourself right. Like don't just take it at first glance, because most of the time it's like Occam's razor. The most likely explanation for something that is insanely not intuitive is that it's just wrong, that there's a problem somewhere. Now, occasionally, sometimes you actually will be right. Like now those will be pay dirt moments. Like those are the moments that make it all worth it. Like there are times when you do find the nugget of gold. Like you're staring at it and like, this is it. This was the problem. This was the thing we were looking for this whole time. But you have to be very diligent about like following it through, like really understanding what you're looking at. Is this data representative? Is this data like a good sample of the audience we care about? Is it already subject to some sort of selection bias? Like oftentimes when I see analysis from different product leaders or even data teams, you can drive a truck through it, like literally drive a truck through it. Like, and if you present data with authority, and that data is like ridiculous, or the analysis is just full of holes, you don't just not get benefit for that. Like you lose a whole bunch of brownie points. Like it would be better not to show up with an analysis that isn't clear than it would be to show up with an analysis that's dumb. And I see people self-immolate like on this actually relatively regularly, because they just bring a knife to a gunfight or whatever. Like they just bring in an analysis that is just not, it doesn't hold water. And they present it and then get shot down live, which is nobody's idea of a good time. So kind of if I give you a little bit of additional tactical things about that, it'd be okay. If I'm looking at a piece of data, what was upstream of this piece of data, and does that look normal? Like so this thing happened or whatever, which you're very, very excited about. What happened before that? And does that match what you think should have been right? Right. So what happened before this? What was the situation? And then okay, for that thing that you're looking at, what happened after? Like if you have an idea of what happened before and after, that gives you some idea of whether or not this thing is at all worth interesting to talk about. And then go one click above above this data that you're looking at. So it's like, okay, these things, let's say it's I'm looking at onboarding success. Let's say I'm looking at onboarding success to second week retention or something like that. I'm like, I have found this thing that totally crushes it. This intervention crushes it. If you go upstream and you find out that this intervention only applies to 2% of the inbound onboarding stream, it's meaningless. It's most likely just a random aberration. But even if it was not a random aberration, it's not a useful tool, right? And so you got to go up, and then you might go downstream, and you might find, yep, they last for 2 in the second week, but in the third week they all churn. So basically pointless. Why are we even talking about this? Or then you might step all the way back and go, okay, yes, those people do get retained for longer, but their average ASP is smaller. Because what we really care about, we do care about engagement and we care about more customers, but we want to keep the customers at a high ASP to reach a certain revenue goal. Like the final goal is happy customers paying us money. So that's what I mean about like going a click up. But if you go a click to the left, a click to the right, so before and after, and then a click up, and you still see the thing that tells you the story that you want to tell, then now you've got something that's very compelling, because people want to hear about that. They want to hear, well, what did happen before? What did happen after? And why is that outcome happening? But you have to really do your homework and really be rigorous about it to avoid finding fool's gold.
I love that advice. ASP, what does that stand for, by the way?
Oh, average sale price.
Average sale price.
Think about it as MRR or some other like revenue metric. Yeah.
Got it. This point you made about how a lot of times experiments show positive and then they end up not being anything. I had the head of growth from Shopify on the podcast, and they do this really cool thing where they keep holdouts for years of cohorts, and then it auto emails them, I think, a year or two later, hey, check this and see these cohorts are still, this is still high or not. And 40% of the time turns out neutral after a positive experiment long term.
Interesting. It's really funny because at Atlassian we did something similar. We had a global holdout group actually that was held out of all experiments. And so the experiment platform couldn't target that group at all. So 10% of all people never saw anything ever. Turns out to be really, really helpful because you can always compare them against whatever the experience was for any of the same vintage of cohort. I agree with you. But the other thing is I don't really love some of that thinking process just in general. It's like, hey, let's say an experiment does show a temporary benefit. If an experiment shows a temporary benefit, but that benefit does not persist forever, does that mean the temporary benefit was never worth it? Or does that just mean the temporary benefit was an opportunity to reach another level you just didn't capitalize on? Like, I don't think there's a perfect answer is what I'm trying to say. It's like, I don't think that the fact that a benefit doesn't last forever means that you failed. But I agree with you that like not trying to understand, well, what has the net benefit been? What has the net lift been? Is also really important too. That's why growth is so hard. Like growth as part of product is so especially hard.
Marketers, I know that you love TLDRs, so let me get right to the point. Wix Studio gives you everything you need to cater to any client at any scale, all in one place. Here's how your workflow could look. Scale content with dynamic pages and reusable assets effortlessly. Fast-track projects with built-in marketing integrations like Meta, CAPI, Zapier, Google Ads, and more. A/B test landing pages in days, not weeks, with intuitive design tools. Connected tracking and analytics tools like Google Analytics and SEMrush. And capture key business events without the hassle of manual setup. Manage all your client social media and communications from a unified dashboard, then create, schedule, and post content across all their channels. If you're working on content-rich sites, Wix Studio's no-code CMS lets you build and manage without touching the design. And when you're ready for more, Wix Studio grows with you. Add your own code, create custom integrations with Wix-made APIs, or leverage robust native business solutions. Drive real client growth with Wix Studio. Go to wixstudio.com. So you built the first B2B growth team when you were at Atlassian, correct?
Yes. Yeah. It was
okay.
Makes me feel like an old person, but yes, it was a very long time ago.
Slash, maybe it's a new thing. It's either a long time ago or we've just recently figured out this is a thing that you could do in a B2B is like focus on growth.
Yeah, it is. It's like so that was around about 2012. And at that time, kind of growth hacking was a thing. People don't really use that term anymore,
right.
but in B2C, it was a very big deal because people could see Facebook doing their 10 friends in 7 days, and they could see this kind of thing that was working for people. And they're like, man, that's amazing. And at Atlassian, we set out to go, okay, well, do those techniques work in B2B? And honestly, it's kind of obvious now that a lot of them do and that it's worth doing. But at the time, it wasn't that obvious because for a lot of B2B companies, I mean, you summarized it earlier, Lenny, distribution covers all faults. Like almost all ills can be, filled in by really great distribution. Like if you have a really good ground game, really good marketing, a really good ground game, and you're kind of jamming your product into the channel, like you're jamming your product in front of people and you're papering over the ugly parts with, customer success people and services and consulting and whatever, then people will buy almost any software. Or you can certainly be successful with a lot of different software. But back in 2012, it wasn't clear of like, okay, well, if instead you went at this differently and you tried to make software that sell itself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Right. And, now I would say that it's pretty clear that the juice is worth the squeeze to the point that lots of people think about this all the time. But it was a bit of an interesting kind of time at that time.
And that was essentially the beginnings of product-led growth. Is that a simple way to think about it?
Basically, it's now called PLG, but at that time, we didn't even know what to call it exactly.
Just growth. Yeah. So kind of based on that experience, a lot of B2B companies now have growth teams. They're investing in growth. What makes a great growth team in B2B? Any pitfalls you often find folks fall into that you think they should try to avoid?
Ultimately, a lot of these types of endeavors are a matter of balance. So what I mean by that is growth teams tend to go through a set of phases, right? Their first phase is proving their value at all, right? So that they call that the gold rush phase. That's the this thing's probably not worth even doing. Why are we doing this? Merry band of people out there trying to prove that there's some growth vector somewhere, right? So that's the proof it phase. And so, the advantage of that phase is like life's good because there's usually a lot of growth to be found because nobody's gone looking before, so life's good. But it's pretty random because you're just literally searching across a random search space going, have we tried X? Have we tried Y? Have we tried Z? Then kind of once you get that model going, then it starts to be, okay, how do we scale this thing? Like, is this just a flash in the pan? Do we just find a little bit of, low hanging fruit and there's nothing else here there? Like, was this just a project we should have done rather than an ongoing thing? So you have to kind of make it a system. Like, you have to prove that it can be repeated. And then you have to scale it. Like, it has to become a thing. It has to become part of your DNA. You have to be taking a PLG lens to everything you do, all the way from, paid acquisition to activation, retention, engagement, cross-product expansion, upsell. I mean, you name it, like all the different ways you can grow a product by revenue or engagement. There's many different ways to go about that. And so you end up having to scale out and be able to do all of those different things. And then you have to figure out how you fit in with the rest of the organization, because there's other people who build products all day, every day. There's other people who sell that product all day, all day. There's other people who market that product all day, all day. And so, growth organizations are in this interesting space. They're in between everybody else. They're kind of in everybody else's sandpit in a little way. And they're kind of at the edge of everybody's kind of full-time job. And they are very valuable, but they can be, complicated because of all those relationships and because of the way they sit amongst all of the other parts of the organization. So many organizations fail because they don't really find much that wins, or when they do find wins, it just seems totally random, or they do find a lot of wins, but they all can't understand them because they seem like they're just a random walk through a bunch of potential opportunities. Like, there's many different ways to kind of fail to fit as you go through your growth phase, from trying the ideas to success to scaling to operationalizing.
One of the biggest memes along these lines is a lot of companies claim there's like just PLG rarely ever works. You always either you try it and it just doesn't work, or it eventually just peters out. I guess, any thoughts on just like what are signs that your product has a chance to work product-led growth versus you're just go straight to sales immediately and don't even worry about this?
First, let's examine the counterfactual, right? So let's start with the opposite of your question and say, hey, how would the world be sadder if we all just gave up on PLG? Like, if we just said, hey, there's no point in doing it in B2B SaaS. The problem is that there is not a natural force that pulls companies towards thinking about the end user's enjoyment and success earlier in their journey. There is no natural force. There's no natural countervailing force. Why is that? I mean, 101, the buyer is the most important person. The economic buyer is the most economic person. Their needs are the number one thing. They're usually the person driving the RFP. They're usually the person dealing with the sales organization. So the needs of the person who you hear are usually all feature-driven, and they're not from the end users. And so you're kind of sowing a seed of your own demise if you don't think about that end user. But it's one thing to say that you should think about the end user. It's a whole other thing to have a system by which you do that. Because people pay lip service to all sorts of things. But, I'm sure you've heard this one before, but in economics, like, people only do what their incentives tell them to do. Like, broadly speaking, that is what they do. That is what happens. You get what you set out to measure. You get what you give people incentives to do. If there is nobody in the organization whose true incentive is to measure that success, the end user success, their enjoyment, their happiness, their retention, their engagement early on, it will not happen. Or at best, it will be a hobby, right? And so then, by extension, if I start from there, then I say, okay, let's say it doesn't exist, PLG doesn't exist, and therefore it's a hobby, and therefore there will be a bunch of hobby people who care about this. Then you ask yourself, okay, will that mean that there will be many products for which, like, those experiences really suck? And does that mean that will be an opportunity for competitors of those products to be better at that? And is that a differentiated competitive advantage? Yeah, I'd say it is. And so, like, kind of I just work my way backwards, and I go, okay, you could say that your PLG investment might be too high. You could be like, well, if I invest more, I won't get any more juice. Like, this is not, like, I can't spend my life just experimenting in the onboarding. Like, that's not the only thing that matters. And that's very, very true. But it's very hard to argue it should be turned to zero. And so to me, therefore, it's about the balance. It's about, okay, how does PLG fit with the other different ways that I grow my business? So at Confluent, for example, we have a PLG function. We do grow with self-serve signups, people who sign up, literally their credit card, like, lots of them sign up and they're very successful, never speak to us. We also have like a enterprise sales team that sells, directly to very big companies, some of the biggest banks in the world, the people you would definitely know of. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that, it's about a balance. It's about getting the motions to work. And for really sophisticated companies, the people who really nail this, It's about making both motions work together. Like if you can get a PLG motion work to feed your sales team, and a sales team motion work to feed your PLG funnel when the sales leads aren't ready yet, and kind of you can get those motions interplaying with each other, you can make a lot of money. It can be an extremely successful way to go to build a very resilient business. Why? Because you get a lot of customers and you get a lot of revenue. Like you can't be that successful as a company if you have a lot of revenue but a small number of customers, because you're captive. Everyone knows that. You can't be that successful as a company if you have a lot of customers but not enough revenue, because you just don't have enough money to sustain operations. So the magic is in having both a very large number of customers and a very large amount of revenue. It's very hard to knock over a company like that. If I look back on my time at ASEAN, I think they shared their most recent numbers. I can't remember what it was, but it was in the public data or whatever, something like 80,000 or 100,000 customers, something like that. Like that's a lot of customers. That's a lot of customers. You let's say you're going up against Jira, and you're like, yeah, man, I'm going to pick off 1,000 customers, right, from Atlassian. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. Obviously, 1,000 customers is a lot. You only have 19. Sorry, it's going to be like 89,000 to go, or 79,000 to go, or however many it is to go. I can't remember their exact number of customers, but like it's very hard to assail a company which has a very large number of customers and a very large amount of revenue. And so that's why I think that PLG as a mechanism is incredibly important for almost any type of company, if you can make the motion work. Like obviously there are companies for whom the motion just is irrelevant, but for those where it does matter, it seems like the juice is worth the squeeze.
That was an awesome answer. I looked up Atlassian, they have 300,000 customers.
Oh man, I'm so far off. When I left, it must have been 80,000 customers.
They've done good work since then. You're talking about incentives and how the power of incentives. Charlie Munger has this great quote I looked up just to make sure I get it right. Show me the incentive and I will show you the outcome.
Yeah, exactly right. I've seen like cases where like a sales team was people trying to get a sales team to do like a PLG motion, and you can beat them over the head as much as you like. You can get into a meeting and tell them that you really, really want them to do this, but at the end of the day, like they're not going to do it. And the same is true for every other kind of like function. It's just the nature of things.
I have some newsletter posts around the stuff if folks want to dig deeper. Also, Elena Verna had an awesome podcast episode talking about product-led sales and kind of the combination of these two things that we'll point to. This is like a whole other topic we can go deep on, but we're not going to do that in this episode. Maybe just one more question. So you mentioned all the companies you worked at. So you've been at Salesforce, Chief Product Officer, MuleSoft specifically within Salesforce, Metromile, Atlassian, Confluent now. A lot of really interesting and different roles. How do you choose where to go work? And how do you choose which opportunities to take? I imagine you have many options.
I like to think of my career, and it's only in hindsight looking at it this way, Lenny. So like, I don't know if forward looking it was obvious to me this way, but looking back, my career's been a little bit like a bingo card. Like I've always been looking to fill in boxes I didn't have filled, because I felt like that would make me a better professional. Like it's like if I didn't know anything about that specific type of sales model or that type of marketing or that type of product management or that type of product or that layer in the stack or that kind of thing, is like, well, if I learn about that thing, I will become more versatile. So actually two things. It's fun. It's fun to learn something new. It's fun to prove to yourself that you can do those new things. And then it makes you more versatile, because it means that any given problem you go up against, you've seen something that pattern matches to it. Like it kind of feels like you end up bringing a gun to a knife fight in a way, because every problem you look at, you're like, oh, I have seen this from the other side. Like I've seen this from some other angle. And so I know that this is likely to work and this is unlikely to work. And so, when I joined, earlier on in my career, I was working for a big small enterprise software company that sold to the Fortune 100. Then I joined Atlassian, and like I shared with you, we had no sales force at all, literally nobody to sell the software. It sold itself, or it didn't get sold at all. And we grew to have 80,000 customers. Like it was just pure product-led growth and just an incredible company. Then I was at Metromile, which was a consumer company that got acquired, made an insurance product for end consumers. So they got nothing to do with technology products, like literally a complicated Internet of Things device you installed in your car. But ultimately, it's an insurance product that you'd sell to grandmothers in Florida as much as you would urban millennials. So, and then at MuleSoft, a totally back-end software that's used by IT organizations, and at Confluent, infrastructure that's used by developers everywhere to build really interesting data-driven applications, data-powered applications to do all sorts of things in real time. And you look across all that and you go, it's all a bit random, right? But like, I didn't see it that way because like I learned, I actually was in sales for a bit. So I ran a pre-sales engineering group, went around the world selling software. So when I joined Atlassian, I wanted to kind of understand what it was to sell software at massive scale with no sales team. Like, can it even be done, right? And so I learned a lot in my time at Atlassian. When I went to Metromile, I'm like, well, I've never built a consumer product before. Like, I can say that I've actually built a product that's touched many millions of people because Jira has, so I felt pretty good about that. But I'd never built one that I could say, yeah, a consumer, your average consumer can use this thing. It's so simple, even my grandma can use it. I'd never built a product like that. So I got that experience at Metromile, which was really fun. I'd never worked inside an organization as big as Salesforce or an organization with as good a sales motion. Like you talked about distribution earlier. Salesforce is an absolutely insane distribution machine, like just an incredible company with just an amazing distribution network and a fantastic marketing approach that it's like a PhD in marketing. When you spend your time at Salesforce, you're like, this company is just one of a kind. Like, it's a one of kind, and it's so outlandishly good at one specific thing. And so looking back, all of these jobs have been, when I say a bingo card, like I've just got an outlandish education in these areas that, are not obvious at all. And once you've seen them, they're like superpowers. They're superpowers to be able to bring that same experience to bear on things. And so one thing that I'm trying to figure out is why often people don't do that. Oftentimes people stay in a very specific domain, like they prefer to stay in a domain, or they prefer to stay in a specific kind of a type of company or a role that works in a certain way, like companies that have the same operating model, or they plan the same way, or they try to stay with things that are pretty similar. But it seems obvious that the most likely way to kind of really grow is the opposite. It's to constantly be choosing things that are outside that, not totally outside the lines. Like, don't jump out of a plane if you've never parachuted before. Like, obviously you want them to be in some way an adjacency, that you want them to have something in common with what but you want them to stretch you and change you. I had like a really kind of transformative experience many years ago when I was at Atlassian, and a guy called Tom Kennedy, he was our general counsel, so like chief legal officer basically, and a lifelong lawyer, very smart guy. I liked him very, very much, but like just a lawyer, corporate lawyer, corporate counsel. I'm sure you know what they're like, and really great guy. And I remember, so mostly in our meetings, he didn't talk that much except about legal things, right? But I remember in one meeting, we were having this vigorous debate about a product strategy question, about like what we should do. Should we go left or should we go right? And like, as usual, he's there and he's mostly just staying silent. And then eventually the conversation's been going on for 15 minutes and he's like, hey, everybody, like a year ago, we talked about X, Y, and Z. And he proceeds to lay out our product strategy at that time. And he's like, just recently we said the following things and that was a product strategy, whatever. Now you're saying this, isn't it obvious that isn't this, like what you guys are saying is not congruent with that. And if you really meant what you said back then, we should be doing X. And again, like the room went silent. Everybody kind of turned to him, kind of nodded. And then everyone went, yeah, okay, I guess we probably should be doing it differently. And so like the meeting stopped. Like when the GC randomly mentioned that he like deeply understood our product strategy and he knew enough to like be able to contribute in that way. And so the life-changing part for me about that was just this realization that if I'm going to be a really great professional, if I'm like the type of professional I want to be is that type of person who can contribute to the whole company in all sorts of ways, like doesn't spend all of their time in everybody else's business, but understands the business and has the, mental horsepower and the experience to be dangerous in all sorts of, and I mean that in a compliment way, I don't mean that in the negative way, but to be dangerous in all sorts of situations. I think that when you have kind of like leaders like that behind you and with you, then you're just unstoppable. Like you're an unstoppable force in business when you kind of have that motion happening.
Wow, that was an awesome story and an awesome perspective. It's similar to the advice I always give PMs of people always wondering, should I like go deep on a specific subject? Should I just try different things? And I find just variety, especially earlier in your career, is really powerful, not just to help you discover the thing you like, but also to your point, just using insights from all these different parts of the product and like internal tools and trust and safety and platform and consumer product side and growth and just core stuff. Like the more of that you have, the stronger you get. And I feel like another benefit of your approach is if you work at just B2B SaaS companies, you're never gonna, like if you have too many of that on your resume, it's very hard to get hired at a consumer company. And so just having it creates a huge optionality for you if you do what you did.
Yeah. It's interesting because people used to talk about people who are T-shaped or whatever. And I've never really loved the analogy because it's more like people are scribble shaped. Like, I mean, like there's the really best people you've worked with, they're more like scribbles than they are T-shaped, because of course you want to be horizontally capable. So you want to be broad, and you do want to be deep, but you actually want to be deep in way more than one thing. Now, obviously, when I say deep, I don't mean like I'm not able to do the job of like, you know, our finance function all day, every day, but I'm 100% good enough to go like 3 clicks below like the simple financial analysis. Like I can go reasonably deep in our financials because I want to, and because it's partly like it matters. Like it's important to be able to do that. And so maybe a different way to think about that bingo card is like, I've rarely regretted going deep in something that isn't quite my job. Like I've rarely regretted it. Like the worst case scenario is I've learned something new that I will never use, which, you know, I guess at least that made my brain slightly more agile. Like, I don't know, like there must be some potential benefit of that. But the very best case scenario is that when I least suspect it, at some point in the future, it will turn out to be the thing that matters. Like it will be the tool that I need when I'm facing some important problem. And I will be like, oh my God, this was worth every cent. And so like, if you think about it on an ROI basis, doing things that aren't in your wheelhouse, like that aren't the things directly in front of you, the ROI can really be outlandish. Like it can be off the charts great, but I guess it's speculative because it's, you know, you don't know you're going to need it tomorrow. You don't know if it's going to be something that's going to be a regular tool you use.
It's interesting to use the bingo card as the analogy. What are you trying to? Is there a bingo moment at the end of this? Or is it retirement?
Is there? Oh, you mean like you've got everything? You've got your collectible Pokemon, collectible Pokemon.
Yeah, collect them all.
Yeah, I was working with you know, somebody at Salesforce, and you know, he was like he'd been there a long time, very, you know, very, very, very successful person. Like honestly, you know, didn't need to work anymore. And he said something that I found really useful. He's like, well, now I'm at the point in my life where I want to work at the intersection of things that I am good at and things that will be valuable to the company to do. So basically, like it feels like the reward of completing your bingo card is actually to just get to spend more time doing things that are leverage, that you enjoy and that are high leverage. And so that seems like a good outcome to me. Like if you know, it's not as though I don't think most people are going to like work and hopefully have some sort of great financial outcome and then go, well, that's it. I'm picking up stumps, I'm retiring. I think for most people, achieving some sort of financial outcome or some sort of, you know, independence or whatever is really just another stage. At that point, it will be, okay, well, now what do I do? Like, what do I do with my life? Like, why? And so that was why I said earlier that at the end of the day, product management is like at times the worst job in the world, and at times easily the best. Like, and it's both, and it can be both. And so, you know, it's hard for me to think about what, you know, if I think about the things that are the intersection of what I'm good at and are valuable to the world, product management is a pretty fun one to do, and it's different every day. So I think we're pretty privileged. For those of you who listen, I mean, obviously your podcast reaches a lot of product people. Like I think we're pretty privileged to be able to operate at that intersection, but it's not easy because you know, you got to show value. You know, it's like it's a very complicated job to show value in and to demonstrate value to the world, and it's constantly being attacked, like you mentioned, but it's still amazing. Like when it all goes right, you know, when a product is very successful in the market, it's hard to describe the joy you get from that.
Kind of along those lines, to close out our conversation before our very exciting lightning round, I want to take us to Failure Corner. People listen to these podcast episodes, and everyone's always just sharing all these wins. Everything's always going great. The CPO of this, CPO of that, just moving on up. And people will want to hear times when things didn't go right, because those are stories people don't share as often. Can you share a story when something didn't go right, when you maybe had a failure in the course of your career, and if you learned something from that experience, what you learned?
I mean, there's a lot of things that didn't go exactly to plan, Lenny. Like very early on in my career, I was still a developer, and I accidentally deleted like one of the core systems of the company that I was working at. So that's going to go down in infamy. But luckily, that one's far in the rearview mirror. Like
that wasn't Atlassian.
No, that was far pre-Atlassian, but very bad. The one I like to talk about, I wasn't directly responsible for it, but I feel like responsible for it. I was at a company, and we launched a product that was one of those products that, in hindsight, should have been really obvious it was going to fail. But for some reason, we were all blinded by the potential. It was a product that it was basically to measure the environmental impact of your company and to help you reduce the environmental impact of your company by think about it like power management, building power management, managing the power draw of computers, managing the power draw of AC and all of that stuff. That was the vision, basically. It's like a kind of a manage your environmental impact of your business. Kind of the idea was pretty cool at the time, and also it was the right time for that. And it's still a thing. It's still an area of active research and investment or whatever. But it was like one of those things, talk about the wrong company, wrong place, wrong time, wrong distribution. Like we had literally no right to win, no right to play, like just absolutely no business in hindsight being in that business. And I feel really bad because again, good idea, wrong company. And at the end of the day, we launched the product. We actually kept the product in market for 2 years. And the final straw was weird. The final straw was actually when a customer finally wanted to pay for it. Like it had been in market for 2 years, and we found ourselves with a customer who wanted to pay millions of dollars for it. They were ready to sign on the dotted line. And that was actually the moment we decided to kill the product, because we're like, if this person signs this piece of paper, we are stuck with this forever. Like this one customer will be bound by contracts for however long or whatever. Like, so we actually ended up killing it at the moment after 2 years of failure, when kind of somebody wanted to pay us money for it. And I look back on that and I'm just like, man, like that was I feel really bad because I'm like, it should have been obvious. It was obvious. And we should have been able to call a spade and I guess speak truth to power. But instead it kind of got through to the keeper and turned out to be a real accidental drain on resources for years and just a big mistake.
So is the lesson there, just be real with yourself? I like that you had this forcing function of like, okay, this is getting for real now. Is it like, I wish we had an earlier forcing function to force us to make a decision?
Yeah. I think if I could do it differently, like I might not have necessarily been able to 100% change the decision, but I should have tried. Like, I mean, it was pretty obvious after 6 months, like this thing was like a bit of a zombie product walking. And the least I could have done is said, like, this thing is dead. Like, we could have called it dead way earlier, but instead we proceeded for another year and a half, investing in it. And so that's the bit that makes me kind of feel like a real bummer about it.
It reminds me of a recent episode with Roz, who is the CMO at Wiz. And she joined as the first PM. And a few weeks into it, with doing tons of calls with customers, she's like, I think I need to quit because I don't really understand what we were building. I don't get it. And everyone's like, I don't either. And it just
why are we doing this thing?
Yeah, the founders just had a vague idea what they were doing, but they didn't really have an idea. And that just sparked okay, wait, no one actually does. Let's actually get more concrete. And it helped them pivot. And now, I don't know if you know about Wiz, but they ended up being the fastest growing startup in history.
Yes, isn't that amazing, right? It doesn't mean it's permanently fatal, but asking that question and kind of going through that reckoning, turns out they came out stronger. Yeah.
Scary, but it turns out it's for the best often. Before we get to a very exciting lightning round, is there anything else that you want to mention or leave listeners with? Maybe a last nugget, something that you think might be helpful before we wrap?
Maybe a couple of different things that I think sometimes well understood, but just repeating them, I guess, because they're very valuable to me. One is that like if you let your calendar rule you, then nothing good will happen. Like, I know people talk about that a lot, but it's surprisingly common in product management in particular that people end up ruled by their calendar. And so it's related to that whole, spend 80% of your time thinking about things going on outside the business. Easy said, very hard to do. And if you don't do it, no one's going to do it for you. And so it's really hard to be successful unless you find a way to force that to happen. So I'd repeat that. I would kind of also, somebody said this to me, and I never actually looked up the quote, but apparently Colin Powell said that if you're making a decision with less than 30% of the available data, you're making a big mistake. if you're making a decision only after you have 70%, it was either 70% or 77%, I can't remember the exact number. When you have 77% of all the available data, you have waited far too long, right? And that's I've always found that like very insightful, and a bit relates a little bit to what we were talking about data earlier. But at the end of the day, we get paid in product management to make decisions, good decisions, paid to make good decisions that will deliver business benefit. And a decision with too little data is fatal. A decision that takes too long and collects too much data is also fatal. So like everything, it's about trying to find the balance of all of these different things to try and deliver business advantage.
A great way to circle back to all the things we've been talking about. With that, we reached our very exciting lightning round. Are you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. What are 2 or 3 books that you have recommended most to other people?
Yeah, they're oldies but goodies. It's probably going to be the Lean Startup that I still find actually really good, and the kind of key lessons in there I still think are very applicable to a lot of people, particularly the cohort analysis bit, which for some reason I still don't see people do anywhere near enough cohort analysis. So there you go, that's my little tip. And then Inspired, how to build products that people love by Marty Kagan and the Silicon Valley Product Group. That's an oldie but a goodie. I think it's got a lot of the key lessons of product management in it, even though it's been around for a long time.
Those are some classics. Very cool. Do you have a favorite recent movie or TV show you've really enjoyed?
I'm watching a program, like it's just I don't get to watch very much TV. Mostly at night, I like to watch things that are extremely light, that like just don't at all inspire any element of stress, and that are very short. So I'm basically short and funny is basically my thing. And there's a new program on Netflix. I think it's called Detroiters.
Oh, I've been watching that.
Yeah, it's really funny. I really like that. It's so ridiculous, but very funny. So I like that.
That main guy, he's so funny. I forget his name, Tim Sweeney or something like that. Yeah, he's so good.
Hilarious, yeah.
Good one. I've been watching that. I'm loving it. It's like very quirky. I think the New York Times quote on there is like very weird. The quote.
It's so weird. Like in the first episode, I'm like, what is this show? It's not even clear what time it's set in. And like, it's very weird. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yes. Well, good way to describe it. Next question. Do you have a favorite product you've recently discovered that you really love?
Yeah, this one's like some of your listeners might be using it, but Glean, like it's a pretty well-known startup now. They recently raised a ton of money. We've been using Glean at Confluent for a long time, and it's just amazing. Like it's just amazing. Okay, I can't describe how good it is, and I don't say this lightly because I think search, like a business search, is probably one of the hardest problems in computing. Actually, getting it right is one of the hardest problems in computing. Amazing. Like it's not often I use a product and I'm like, this thing is like 10 times better than anything that's come before it. It's one of those for me.
What's the simplest way to understand what it does for you?
It searches all of our organization's knowledge. So like the thing you were just saying before, you're like, what does ASP mean, right? If I had that in the meeting, I just open my new tab. It'll automatically take over my new tab, or just be like, what does ASP mean? And it will summarize back to me what ASP means. And it will give me a link to all the documents inside our company that describe what ASP means. And then it will tell me who the expert in ASP at our company is. It's like having a second brain. It's like an insanely cool kind of organization search thing.
Great tip. Okay, 2 more questions. Do you have a favorite life motto that you come back to, share with folks, find useful in work or in life?
I think about this one a lot. When I started off in my career, I was an engineer's engineer. I used to very much about like technical correctness and what computers were capable of, and kind of technical righteousness. The right answer rather than there is only one right answer and whatever. It's a long-winded way of saying that I often think about this phrase, which is people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so I've realized that really being able to influence people, it doesn't matter about whether or not you're right or whether or not you're wrong. And at the end of the day, it's first about trust and about relationships and caring about what each other's outcomes are, what their incentives are, and all good things sit on top of that. Once you have those kind of foundations, then you can build like really good partnerships, and that's where good progress comes from.
Wow, that is so good. It connects with like radical candor, similar. Like in theory of just caring, people need to feel like you care deeply about them before they take your advice. And that also connects with this parenting book I'm reading called Listen, that a previous guest recommended, which is all about how your kids have problems when they feel like your connection to them is weak. And so the solution is to build a stronger connection for them to know that you care deeply about them. So this is really connects with so much of what I've been reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Great one. Final question. you're born in Sydney. Folks can maybe guess by your accent. If someone were to visit Sydney, any tips, anything you think they should check out? Favorite thing in Sydney?
Yeah, Sydney's a really beautiful city, and like it's kind of famous for its beaches, and it's basically a metropolitan city. People probably be very surprised when you visit it. It's a very big city, very metropolitan, a little bit like New York, but New York with really beautiful beaches. If you want to think about it that way, it's kind of crazy. But there's actually like a ton of really cool nature and beautiful things all around Sydney. And so if you want to do something like off the beaten path, you can actually there's an area called the Blue Mountains, which is like an hour and a half drive from Sydney. And you can abseil down a waterfall, which is, well, actually, firstly you go canyoning through a canyon full of water, and then you abseil a waterfall at the end. And if you're looking for like just a really beautiful, fun kind of adventure-like thing, an hour and a bit away from a massive metropolitan city, that's my sort of happy place, like really beautiful outdoors stuff while also next to a beautiful city.
And you said you sail. What sort of sail off a waterfall?
Abseil. You might think of it as rappelling. Rappelling, I think.
Okay.
Lowering yourself down on a rope or.
Got it. Okay, because when I hear sail, I'm like thinking a boat just jumps through over the waterfall.
Oh, no. Abseiling, which is also, I think in the States you guys call it rappelling.
Rappelling, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Sean, you're awesome. This was extremely cool. Thank you so much for being here. 2 final questions. Where can folks find you online if they want to reach out? Also, point folks to your Reforge courses that you created. And final question, how can listeners be useful to you?
Sure, yeah. So my Reforge courses, you can check them all out at reforge.com. As you mentioned, the retention engagement course and the data for product managers course. So, love to see folks get some value from that. Lots of people have been through those courses already, and I really get a lot of value from it because, like I said, one of my goals is to help all of us be better product people. I think our leverage could be massive. Where you can get in touch with me, obviously LinkedIn, but also Sean M. Clowes on X, if you want to get in touch. And in terms of, being useful to me, I mean, broadly speaking, I'm always open to new ideas. Like if people have ideas about how to do better B2B POG, better B2B, product-led sales, for example, better ways of going about distribution and product-led sales and product-led growth inside enterprise companies. Hey, I'm open to learn myself. We're all in one big journey, learning how to do this better.
So true. Sean, thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Lenny. It was great.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. You can find all past episodes or learn more about the show at lennyspodcast.com. See you in the next episode.